The 10th City. Qiu Long held the 9th City's city lord's hand as they strolled down the streets of the 10th City. They immediately attracted a lot of attention. Who is this person? Then, why does the old man who's being held by the hand look so familiar? Not good. This old man is the 9th City's city lord, Divine Lord Xianxia. Divine Lord Xianxia is a veteran ultimate ruler. How could he be a slave? What's this person's background? Immediately, after the white-haired old man's identity was recognized, it immediately caused a burst of exclamations in the crowd. Everyone quietly moved back a little, keeping a distance from Qiu Long. But there were also some ultimate rulers who could not stand it. They immediately stood up, and one of them said with a cold face, "Sir, Divine Lord Xianxia has always been on good terms with others and has never gotten involved in disputes. I wonder how he has offended you for you to treat him like this? As if you're a pig or a dog." As a veteran ultimate ruler, Divine Lord Xianxia had stayed in the ancient path of Star's 9th City for tens of thousands of years. He was also a good person and was naturally popular. The people who stood out to speak were the people who had received Divine Lord Xianxia's favor in the past. When Qiu Long saw that, he chuckled and patted Divine Lord Xianxia's head casually, causing his head to produce loud slapping sounds. He squinted his eyes and said, "Dog slave, I didn't expect you to be so popular in a place full of trash." Divine Lord Xianxia's heart trembled. He did not know what had happened to him. Despite being humiliated by Qiu Long, there was not any anger on his face. Instead, it was filled with fear. "Dog slave, I think these people are too noisy. What do you think?" Qiu Long raised his head and looked at the few ultimate rulers who spoke up for justice and chuckled. When Divine Lord Xianxia heard that, he nodded his head in agreement, just like a dog wagging its tail to its owner to please him. "Ha ha ha. You're becoming more and more like a slave. Ha ha." Qiu Long laughed and stretched out his right hand, grabbing at the few ultimate rulers who had spoken out for justice. "I'll get them to accompany you." Whoosh! Qiu Long's arm suddenly stretched out, and his 5 fingernails turned black and sharp like 5 ribbons. Then, he clawed down. "You're looking for death." Instantly, the expressions of the few ultimate rulers changed. Divine power surged from their bodies, and they struck at Qiu Long's arm. Boom! 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 Like stones sinking into the ocean. The attacks of these ultimate rulers landed on Qiu Long's arm and were obliterated without even causing a ripple. The next moment, bang! Qiu Long's 5 fingers suddenly grabbed the neck of one of the ultimate rulers. "Come over here." "Hee hee." Qiu Long sneered, and in an instant he grabbed the ultimate ruler. No matter how he, the ultimate ruler, struggled, the 5 fingers of the dragon-trapping prisoner were like 5 towering mountains, rendering him unable to move. "I think I heard you criticizing me just now?" "Hee hee." Qiu Long chuckled, and then a bone spike shot out from his back. It transformed into a pitch-black chain that bound the neck of the ultimate ruler. "Since you care so much about this dog slave, then you can accompany him. Run." The remaining ultimate ruler's expression changed upon seeing this, and he immediately turned to flee. However, the next moment, whoosh! Whoosh! On the back of the dragon, the black bone spikes turned into black chains again and shot toward the ultimate rulers. In the space of a few breaths, the black chains had pierced through the bodies of these ultimate rulers. Then, the ultimate rulers all fell and turned into dust amid their shrill howls. All of a sudden, on the streets of the 10th City, Qiu Long's strange laughter and mournful wails sounded one after another. On another street, Ruler Hao Jin wielded a spear and was dressed in godly armor as he patrolled the area. After Jian Wushuang had left, he had sought refuge with Lord Blue. Now, he was working under Lord Blue as a divine armor guard while he trained himself and improved his cultivation. He wanted to pass the God Refining Tower trial as soon as possible, enter the back 8 cities, and rely on Jian Wushuang. Ruler Hao Jin frowned when he heard the screams from the nearby streets. He decided to go over and take a look. Ruler Hao Jin walked to the side of the street and immediately saw the scene of Qiu Long killing several other rulers. Another one. Qiu Long's white eyes turned slightly as he looked at the approaching ruler Hao Jin. The corners of his mouth slowly curled up into an evil smile. Ruler Hao Jin's heart instantly turned cold. He wasn't a slow-witted person. When he saw this, he immediately realized that this person was far from someone he could fight against. He immediately turned to flee. This person is quite clever. Qiulong shook his head. Just as he was about to let Ruler Hao Jin off, Divine Lord Xianxia suddenly said, "Master, aren't you looking for the blood sword? I remember that the person just now was the blood sword's partner. If we can capture him, we'll definitely know where the blood sword is." "Oh, you're courting death." Qiulong raised an eyebrow, and he immediately shot out a large hand to grab Ruler Hao Jin, who had already fled 1,000 kilometers. Ruler Hao Jin's expression changed drastically, but he knew that struggling was useless. He resigned himself to his fate and allowed the dragon to grab him. What do you want to do?" Ruler Hao Jin's lips trembled as he looked at Qiulong. Qiulong sized up Ruler Hao Jin and chuckled. "I ask you, do you know where the blood sword is? You're looking for Lord Bloodsword?" Ruler Hao Jin's heart instantly trembled. At the same time, in the 12th city, after Jian Wushuang flew out of the governor's mansion, he immediately saw the 6 commanders, including Commander Mountain Shaker, coming over together. There were also 60 ultimate rulers standing behind them. Seeing Jian Wushuang come out, except for the 10 ultimate rulers behind Commander Mountain Shaker, who looked extremely reverent because they had seen Jian Wushuang fight, the other 50 ultimate rulers looked at Jian Wushuang with disdain. They did not show any respect. "Blood sword, I've brought you the person. We still have important matters to attend to, so we'll take our leave first." Mountain Shaker and the other 6 great commanders greeted him with a smile. "All right," he said. Jian Wushuang nodded. The few of them chatted for a while more before the 6 commanders left, leaving Jian Wushuang and the 60 ultimate rulers. At first, with the 6 commanders present, the 50 ultimate rulers didn't dare to be too presumptuous. However, after the 6 commanders left, the 50 ultimate rulers looked at Jian Wushuang with disdain. Seeing this, Jian Wushuang shook his head in his heart. He knew that these people were disdainful of him. He also knew that they were dissatisfied with the sudden transfer from their original commander and wanted to give him a chance to show off his power. However, Jian Wushuang did not bother to argue with them. He said indifferently, "You can do whatever you want. I won't restrict you too much, as long as you don't disturb me." After saying that, Jian Wushuang turned around and walked away. Now that the Wuxia Divine Sword was about to be repaired and the 2 venomous fangs of Heavenly Snake Playboy were about to be refined, it was time for him to leave. Just as Jian Wushuang was about to leave, "I heard you're only a 5th stage ruler, Bloodsword?" A bald man walked out of the crowd and looked down at Jian Wushuang with his chin. Jian Wushuang stopped and turned back to look at the bald man. He said indifferently, "That's right. I'm only a 5th stage great ruler. But so what?" The moment he finished speaking, the crowd burst into laughter. "Ha ha ha ha. A mere 5th stage chief ruler wants to command us ultimate chief rulers? What a joke. A 5th stage chief ruler? I can kill a group of them with a single slap. Humph, if word of us being led by a mere 5th stage great ruler like you were to spread, wouldn't we become a laughingstock?" The ultimate rulers all laughed coldly. When the 10 ultimate rulers, led by Commander Mountain Shaker, saw this, their faces filled with anger. They were very grateful to Jian Wushuang. They knew that if it were not for Jian Wushuang, they would not even be able to stand here, let alone get the God Sealing Tablet. "What are you guys talking about? Lord Bloodsword might only be a 5th stage ruler, but his battle power was definitely at the peak of rulers. Song Sanjian killed Song Feng, who was nearly invincible." One of the 10 ultimate rulers immediately retorted. However, this person's voice was too small and was quickly drowned out by the loud laughter. A 5th stage chief ruler killed a chief ruler who was almost invincible? You believe such a ridiculous joke? The bald man looked at the 10 angry ultimate rulers with disdain. Then, he looked straight at Jian Wushuang and sized him up. He sneered. "If this blood sword really had such battle power, it would have been famous in the universe long ago. The way I see it, this is a trap set up by the other camps to target our Lord Overlord. They deliberately put on such a show so that Bloodsword can enter the Overlord's camp and be entrusted with an important task. Shut up. When Lord Bloodsword killed Song Feng, we all saw it with our own eyes. The ultimate ruler did not wait for him to finish speaking. His face was cold. When the bald man heard this, he immediately curled his lips and replied indifferently, "Who knows if you guys have already been assimilated by the other factions?" As soon as he said this, the 10 ultimate rulers led by Commander Mountain Shaker changed their expressions. The entire place was so silent that even a pin drop could be heard. The power of these words was too great. It was almost as if they were saying that the 10 of them were spies sent by the subordinates of other big shots. Seeing this, the bald man felt that he had made a mistake and said again, "Of course, I was just casually saying it. I didn't mean to target you." As for the 10 ultimate rulers, they could not hold back any longer. In an instant, their divine power began to surge. For a moment, the atmosphere at the scene was tense and dangerous. Jian Wushuang looked at the scene and frowned. Now that he was about to leave, he did not want to get involved too much. He turned a blind eye to these 60 ultimate rulers who had been assigned to him. As long as these people did not go too far, he would listen. However, this did not mean that Jian Wushuang was weak and easily bullied. It did not mean that Jian Wushuang would allow others to challenge his dignity. "What's your name?" Jian Wushuang looked at the bald man and said expressionlessly. The bald man did not show any fear on his face. He stuck out his chest and sneered, "I never change my name. You can just call me Divine Lord Xue Peng." "Divine Lord Xue Peng?" Jian Wushuang shook his head and said, "Since you're not convinced that I'm able to take the commander's position, why don't we have a battle?" "Oh? You want to bet with me?" Divine Lord Xue Peng raised his eyebrows when he heard that. He then laughed and said jokingly, "Little fellow, how do you want to bet with me? It's simple. I'll only use one finger. If you can take it, you'll be the commander from now on. I, Bloodsword, will follow your orders without any objections." Jian Wushuang said indifferently. The next moment, Jian Wushuang's voice suddenly turned cold. "If you can't take it, then I will take your life." When he said that, Jian Wushuang had already exerted some pressure. In an instant, Divine Lord Xue Peng's heart turned cold, and he had the illusion that he wanted to kneel down and submit. After taking a deep breath, Divine Lord Xue Peng made up his mind and sneered, "You're just a mere 5th stage great ruler? Why wouldn't I dare?" After hearing that, Jian Wushuang remained expressionless while the 10 ultimate rulers brought by Commander Mountain Shaker had already mourned for Divine Lord Xue Peng in their hearts. They looked at each other and could see the joy in each other's eyes. It was obvious that they had hated Divine Lord Xue Peng to the core. "Then let's start." Jian Wushuang was expressionless. He raised his finger and pressed it between Divine Lord Xue Peng's eyebrows. Sharp sword chi began to gather at Jian Wushuang's fingertips. Returning shield. Although Divine Lord Xue Peng looked reckless and rude, he did not really look down on Jian Wushuang as he appeared to be. He quickly took out a top-grade defense law cardinal treasure from his interspatial ring. Whoosh! 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 Streams of sword chi gathered on Jian Wushuang's fingertips, and the entire governor's manor started to tremble. It was as if a storm of sword chi had formed at his fingertips. At that moment, the expressions of the many ultimate rulers present changed drastically. They could clearly feel the terrifying power contained in Jian Wushuang's fingertips. This finger was enough to blow up a planet. "Retreat! Retreat!" The dozens of ultimate rulers immediately growled and retreated. As for Divine Lord Xue Peng, who had been targeted by Jian Wushuang's finger, his expression turned pale and beads of sweat, the size of beans, appeared on his forehead. He gritted his teeth and stared at Jian Wushuang's finger that was getting closer and closer to him. He trembled in fear. He wanted to escape with those ultimate rulers, but he felt an invisible and extremely powerful aura suppressing him, making him unable to move at all. How could this be? Divine Lord Xue Peng said in disbelief. Gradually, the finger pressed on the shield of returning origin that was in front of him. Kacha! Without any resistance, the origin returning shield, which was known for its strong defense, cracked and finally fell apart with a bang. The next moment, the finger kept enlarging in Divine Lord Xuepeng's eyes. It grew bigger and bigger. In the end, the finger landed on his forehead. After Jian Wushuang's finger touched the place between Divine Lord Xuepeng's eyebrows, Divine Lord Xuepeng felt a huge pressure from Jian Wushuang's finger. His legs went soft and he knelt down in front of Jian Wushuang with a plop. "No, no, Lord Commander, I know I was wrong." His throat kept rolling, and bean-sized beads of sweat dripped down his forehead. "It's too late." Jian Wushuang shook his head when he heard that. From his fingertips, sharp sword essence shot into Divine Lord Xuepeng's divine body. Bang! An earth-shattering explosion rang out. Immediately, Divine Lord Xuepeng's body was crushed, and there was no breath of life. Apart from the people brought by Commander Mountain Shaker, the remaining dozens of ultimate rulers were all shocked as if they had seen a ghost, and their bodies trembled. What kind of heaven-defying combat strength is this? Everyone was terrified. Those who had provoked Jian Wushuang earlier were so frightened that they almost fell to the ground. Naturally, no one who could make it to the last 8 cities on the ancient path of starry sky was weak. In the outside world, they would be the proud sons of heaven in their respective sects and holy lands. As for Divine Lord Xuepeng, he dared to take the lead to stir up trouble because he was confident in his own strength. Among the dozens of ultimate rulers, he was considered one of the top experts. In the end, such an expert had been killed by Jian Wushuang with just one finger? Just how powerful was this blood sword? Everyone did not dare to continue thinking. As for the 10 ultimate rulers that Commander Mountain Shaker had brought with him, they looked at each other and smiled. There was no surprise on their faces. Even Cong Feng, who was almost an unrivaled ruler, had been killed by Jian Wushuang with 3 sword moves. Xuepeng was only a top expert among the ultimate rulers. How could he still be alive? However, they had never expected that Jian Wushuang would kill Divine Lord Xuepeng with just one finger without even using his sword. This raised Jian Wushuang's status in their hearts to another level. "Do you have any objections to me being the 7th commander?" Jian Wushuang stood with his hands behind his back. He glanced at the dozens of rulers and said with a faint smile, I don't dare, I don't dare." The rulers immediately shook their heads like rattledrums. Seeing this, Jian Wushuang ignored them and slowly walked toward a wing room. "Without my order, no one is allowed to come within 30 meters of this room." As soon as he finished speaking, the 2 wooden doors of the room opened automatically. Jian Wushuang stepped in and then closed the door tightly with a muffled bang. Time passed and spring and autumn changed. 60 years passed. 60 years was already more than half of a mortal's life, but to cultivators, it was just a snap of the fingers. In the depths of the 7th commander's manor, a muffled sound suddenly came from a side room that had been sealed for 60 years. A black-robed, black-haired, cold-looking young man was sitting cross-legged in the room. His eyes were closed, and an ancient sword manual was placed in front of him. The word tarot was carved into the sword manual. This was the famous tarot sword manual from 300 chaos cycles ago. In the next moment, the black-haired young man slowly opened his eyes, which were filled with joy. Although the 60-year-long closed-door cultivation was not long, or rather extremely short, it had helped Jian Wushuang improve greatly. In the past 60 years, Jian Wushuang had not only repaired the Wuxia divine sword, but also refined the 2 venomous fangs into 3 drops of supreme venom that could kill an unparalleled ruler. This meant that Jian Wushuang had one more trump card. Once the 3 drops of venom were used at the right time, they could easily kill low-level invincible rulers such as Lord Jinan and the 3rd Prince. Jian Wushuang would then be able to get rid of the awkward situation where he could only kill invincible rulers by relying on the sword technique, Eternal Night. Even the 9 great overlords in the depths of the ancient path of stars, the rulers of the universe, would die to these 3 drops of poison if they were careless. However, this was nothing to Jian Wushuang's improvement. Jian Wushuang's greatest improvement in the 60 years was his sword principle. After breaking through to the 4th level of sword principle origin, Jian Wushuang had not had the time to sort out his own sword principle origin. In the past 60 years, Jian Wushuang had relied on the fourth level of the universe sword principle origin to not only sort out and deduce all the sword principle superpowers he had learned along the way, but also to make up for the gaps and make the star-slashing sword move advance from the great completion to the completion. Furthermore, he continued to study Eternal Night and truly mastered it. Jian Wushuang believed that once he used the Eternal Night, his power would increase by leaps and bounds. Even the ninth Culpa King, who had been the #1 master at the ultimate ruler of the universe, would have to avoid facing the current Eternal Night. It's a pity that I still can't comprehend the second move of the Tarot Sword Manual. Daybreak. Jian Wushuang sighed. However, he also understood that the 5 superpowers recorded in the Tarot Sword Canon were all supreme unique skills. He was already very lucky to be able to comprehend Eternal Night. If he wanted to comprehend the other sword moves, he would have to at least reach the ultimate ruler realm to have a chance. However, this is already enough. Jian Wushuang smiled. He was now confident that if it was not for the presence of the unparalleled ruler, ordinary ultimate rulers would not pose any threat to him. Even if it was an unparalleled ruler, only the unparalleled rulers of the 9 magnates could make him fight with all he had. It's about time to leave this place. After thinking for a while, Jian Wushuang's eyes began to flicker. He had joined the Conqueror's camp because he wanted to find a place to settle down and figure out the rules of the last 8 cities. Now that he had almost completely figured out the situation, it was time to leave and find the investiture of the gods himself. Just as Jian Wushuang was about to leave, he received a message from Commander Mountain Shaker in his mind. Commander Bloodsword, come to the Conqueror's divine palace. 5 investiture of the gods have been found in the 16 cities. Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows when he heard the message. 5 god sealing tablets? The god sealing tablet represented the qualification to participate in the great clan gathering. The more god sealing tablets one obtained, the more likely one would be to enter the great clan gathering and strive to become a child under that lord and have the qualification to listen to the Tao. Now, more than half of the investiture of the gods had fallen into the hands of the 9 magnates. There were only 20 to 30 investiture of the gods that had yet to appear. This time, 5 investiture of the gods appeared at the same time, which was enough to shake the entire 8 cities. One must know that even the 9 magnates only had 10 pieces of the investiture tablet. Forget it. Let's just wait and see. Jian Wushuang made up his mind and immediately flew toward the Overlord Divine Palace. Soon, Jian Wushuang arrived at the Overlord Divine Palace. In the hall, the Overlord sat at the head of the table with a solemn expression. Below him, the 6 commanders sat upright and still, their eyes fixed on the ground. Their faces were also extremely serious. Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows and cupped his hands. Greetings, Overlord. Sit down, the Overlord said indifferently, nodding. After Jian Wushuang sat in the 7th seat, the Overlord took a deep breath and glanced at them one by one. He said in a deep voice, I'm sure you know the reason why I've gathered you here. That's right. There are 5 investiture of the gods in the 16th city. As soon as he finished speaking, the pupils of the 6 commanders shrank slightly when they received the Overlord's confirmation. One had to know that 5 god sealing tablets was not a small number. Although there were a total of 99 god sealing tablets in the 8 cities, each of the 9 magnates only had about 10. Including those that had yet to be born and those that had been taken away by lone travelers, there were even fewer of them in the hands of the 9 magnates. From this, one could see how important the 5 investiture of the gods were. Now, all the people in the last 8 cities of the ancient Road of Stars are rushing to the 16 cities to fight for the god sealing tablet. We naturally can't miss this. The Conqueror's eyes flickered as he slowly said, this time, besides Commander Buxu, who is guarding the Overlord Divine Palace, the other 6 commanders, Commander Hanfeng and Commander Mountain Shaker, Commander Bloodsword, quickly lead your rulers to the 16 cities and fight for the god sealing tablet. Yes. After the Overlord finished speaking, Jian Wushuang and the other 7 people stood up and cupped their hands in acknowledgement. Yes, I'm sure the 9 magnates have all rushed to the 16th city. Don't waste any time and set off today. You may leave. After leaving the conqueror's divine palace, the 6 great commanders returned to their respective commanders' manors to summon their rulers. They agreed that they would set off together after 6 hours. Jian Wushuang's eyes flickered. He had originally planned to leave today, but now that the 5 investiture tablets had appeared, he changed his mind. Before he left, he would get the 5 investiture tablets first. After returning to the 7th commander's mansion, Jian Wushuang stood in the void and said in a deep voice, "7th commander's mansion, listen up. Come out of seclusion and follow me to the 16th city to fight for the investiture of the gods." As soon as he finished speaking, rays of light shot up into the sky from the 7th commander's mansion and stood behind Jian Wushuang respectfully. Jian Wushuang glanced back at them and nodded in satisfaction. He said, "5 investiture of the gods have appeared in the 16th city. We must get them." "Yes, we will obey the commander's orders." "Yes." The dozens of ultimate rulers responded respectfully, their voices echoing through the clouds. 6 hours later, Jian Wushuang, Mountain Shaker, Han Feng, and the other 6 commanders gathered and rushed to the 16th city. High above the 9 heavens, the strong wind whistled. Jian Wushuang and the other 6 commanders, as well as more than 100 ultimate rulers, strode through the air, covering the sky and the sun. Blood soared. I'm sure all the powerful people in the last 8 cities won't let go of this opportunity. They'll all rush to the 16th city, and some of them might even be unparalleled rulers. We must be careful and not underestimate our enemy, Commander Mountain Shaker said. He was afraid that Jian Wushuang would become arrogant after killing Cong Feng and underestimate the heavens' favorites from the last 8 cities. An invincible ruler? Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows. That's right. The latter 8 cities gather all the ruler-level experts of the entire universe. The 9 magnates aren't the only unparalleled rulers. The 9 magnates are merely the strongest among the unparalleled rulers. With a solemn expression, Commander Mountain Shaker said in a deep voice, "There are even unparalleled rulers under the 9 magnates. For example, the young emperor of Defeng Divine Kingdom has an unparalleled ruler who's been famous for a long time. However, these unparalleled rulers rarely make a move, but now that 5 investiture tablets have appeared, I'm sure they'll definitely join the battle." Jian Wushuang could not help nodding. The universe was vast and boundless, and there were countless geniuses and heroes. The 8 cities behind the ancient path of stars were where all the geniuses of the universe gathered. It was normal for there to be other unparalleled rulers besides the 9 magnates. In the next moment, Jian Wushuang's eyes were filled with fighting intent. To him, ordinary ultimate rulers were nothing more than stinky fish and rotten prawns. He could crush them with a finger. Even the almost invincible ultimate rulers could not last more than a few moves in front of him. Only an unparalleled ruler could stir up Jian Wushuang's battle intent. Everyone chatted as they quickly flew toward the 16th city. The closer Jian Wushuang got to the 16th city, the more he could feel the violent aura in the air. Next to them were powerful ultimate rulers who hurried past them. 3 days later, they finally arrived at the 16th city where the investiture of the gods had appeared. 5 investiture of the gods stood on the peak of a giant mountain like pillars supporting the sky, exuding a terrifying power. The void around the 5 god-sealing monuments was filled with ultimate rulers from all camps. Countless experts stood in the void, and the endless black mass released divine power fluctuations that made the void tremble. The flags that represented the various major factions fluttered in the strong wind. Commander Mountain Shaker looked at them, and his heart immediately sank. The young emperor of the Defeng Divine Kingdom, the prince of the Defeng Divine Kingdom, the saint of the 9 stars Holy Land, the blood god of the Blood Sky Palace, the young clan leader of the Maluo clan, other than Lord Blue, who is guarding the 10th city. The camps of the 9 magnates have all come. Jian Wushuang also looked at the expert standing in the void and could not help but exclaim. In this crowd, he actually saw a familiar face. It was none other than Maluo Yengu, whom he had once fought against. However, the aura of the current Maluo Yengu was much stronger than when he had met him in the 8th city. Just by standing there, he gave off a strong sense of deterrence. It was likely that the current Maluo Yengu's injuries had already completely healed. He was the leader of the Maluo clan in the fight for the God-sealing tablet. When Jian Wushuang looked at him, Maluo Yengu also fixed his eyes on Jian Wushuang. It's him. Maluo Yengu's huge eyes squinted. The next moment, he twisted his neck, and a surging battle intent appeared on his face. In the last battle with Jian Wushuang, he had only recovered half of his strength, so he was suppressed by Jian Wushuang. And this time, he would truly go all out in battle. Let's go over too. Commander Mountain Shaker took a deep breath and walked toward the 5 investiture of the gods in the air with heavy steps. The 16th city, where the 5 investiture of the gods appeared. Countless ultimate rulers stood in the air, exuding wisps of divine power. As far as the eye could see, flags covered the sun, and a black mass of ultimate rulers was present. Mountain Shaker, Jian Wushuang, and the other 6 commanders were not weak among the countless forces. When they stepped toward the void around the 5 gods sealing monuments, some ultimate rulers' pupils shrank and they hurriedly retreated. Han Feng, are you the Overlord's leader this time? The leader of Blood Sky Palace was a devilish young man in a blood-red robe. He sat on a big chair and looked at Mountain Shaker, Jian Wushuang, and the other commanders one by one. Finally, he fixed his eyes on Commander Han Feng, who was in charge of leading the Overlord's camp, with a mocking expression. Commander Han Feng was the first commander under the Overlord. Before Jian Wushuang had joined the Overlord, he had been recognized as the strongest expert. Commander Han Feng was in charge of the competition for the 5 god sealing tablets. According to Jian Wushuang's understanding, Commander Han Feng was the first to join the Overlord's team. He had the longest experience and had been used by the Overlord as a trump card. He rarely fought. Commander Mountain Shaker's evaluation of this person could only be described in 4 words: unfathomable. Commander Han Feng's face darkened when he heard the question, and a cold killing intent flashed in his eyes. Blood Rain, let's cut to the chase. Let's settle all our grudges in this battle for the God sealing tablet. Commander Han Feng replied coldly. Ha ha ha. Don't worry. When the guy from the Qiang Divine Kingdom comes, I'll fight you even if you don't say it. The devilish-looking youth named Blood Rain covered his mouth and laughed. Blood Sword, Commander Han Feng and Blood Rain have been enemies since the ancient Path of Stars. When the people from the Qiang Divine Kingdom arrive and the battle begins, you'll join us and kill Blood Rain first. Otherwise, he'll be a great threat. Commander Mountain Shaker sent a message to Jian Wushuang. Hearing this, Jian Wushuang nodded. Blood Rain's evil aura was soaring. In terms of pressure, he could be one of the most dazzling experts present. If he was not an unparalleled ruler, he would be a top expert who was only half a step away from being an unparalleled ruler. Rumble. Just as everyone was discussing the countermeasures, a muffled boom suddenly came from the sky. A carriage pulled by a 3-legged golden crow was approaching from the distance. This carriage was extremely majestic. It was pulled by a huge 3-legged golden crow, and its gilded wheels were carved with dragons and phoenixes. Wherever the wheels passed through the void, they left 2 long traces of fire. From afar, it looked like a blazing sun was pushing forward. On both sides of the carriage were several dozen more ultimate rulers with powerful auras. They had solemn expressions as they guarded the sides and strode over. At the very front of the carriage hung a huge flag with the words, Qiang, written on it. The carriage's appearance immediately attracted the attention of everyone present. Everyone raised their heads and looked over with a serious expression. The people of one of the 9 magnates, the Scarlet Sun Demon Master, have arrived. Isn't this Golden Crow carriage the Scarlet Sun Demon Master's personal carriage? Could it be that the Scarlet Sun Demon Master is personally taking action? Impossible, the 9 magnates have an agreement. They can't attack now. I wonder who the Scarlet Sun Demon Master will send to fight for the God-sealing tablet this time? Besides Lord Blue, who is guarding the 10th city, all the experts under the 9 magnates are here. The crowd was in a heated discussion. The moment the Golden Crow carriage appeared, Jian Wushuang also looked over. However, what was different from others was that Jian Wushuang's eyes looked through the curtain of the carriage and saw the person sitting in it. This person's golden hair was casually tied up with a hairband, and a few strands of hair hung down from his forehead. His handsome face was filled with coldness and pride. Just as Jian Wushuang looked at him, the man seemed to have sensed something and turned to look at Jian Wushuang. In an instant, Jian Wushuang felt two raging flames shooting into his eyes. He could not help but narrow his eyes. This person, he's definitely an invincible ruler. Jian Wushuang retracted his gaze and a thoughtful look flashed across his face. If not for the unparalleled God, this person definitely would not have been able to notice his gaze, much less see him through the void. In the carriage, the golden-haired young man noticed that Jian Wushuang's gaze had left and he snorted. A moment later, the Golden Crow carriage arrived next to the investiture of the gods. "Let's go!" An ultimate ruler standing guard on either side of the carriage strode to the side and lifted the curtain. Then, a tall, cold-looking young man in golden armor with two tridents in his hands stepped down from the carriage. His gaze swept across the entire area, not stopping for anyone. It was as if no one in the entire area was worthy of his attention. How could it be him? He's from the Golden Crow clan, the current prince of the Golden Crow Grand Emperor. I didn't think that the Scarlet Sun Demon Master would send him here to fight for the God Sealing Tablet. TSK. Although the Golden Crow Prince isn't one of the magnates, he's as powerful as the 9 magnates. Under normal circumstances, the Scarlet Sun Demon Master can't order him around. I wonder what kind of benefits the Scarlet Sun Demon Master promised him when he sent him to fight for the God Sealing Tablet. The Golden Crow Prince has always had the reputation of not a big shot, but he's better than a big shot. He's publicly acknowledged as the #1 person under the big shots in the last 8 cities of the ancient Path of Stars. He's here to join the battle. Who can stop him? All the ultimate rulers present were in an uproar when they saw this person. Even Bloodrain and the other leaders of their respective camps had uncertain expressions. No one had expected that the Fiend Lord of the Qiang Divine Kingdom would send the Golden Crow Prince for 5 pieces of the investiture of the gods. Blood Sword, we're in trouble this time. The Golden Crow Prince truly has the battle power of an invincible ruler, and he's on par with major powers. Although he's under the Scarlet Sun Demon Master, the Scarlet Sun Demon Master has never been able to order him around. I wonder what price the Scarlet Sun Demon Master paid to get him to help. Commander Mountain Shaker took a deep breath and said solemnly. Jian Wushuang did not reply, but the battle intent in his eyes surged. That was right, this was the ancient Path of Stars path that he wanted to see. The rulers were gathered, and all races were competing. If it was just some rotten fish, prawns, chickens, and dogs, what was the point? The appearance of the Golden Crow Prince was only the beginning. A few more powerful experts who had clearly stepped into the realm of unparalleled rulers began to fly over. These masters were usually reclusive and had never taken refuge in any of the big shots. But today, they had come from all over the world for the 5 investiture of the gods. With the arrival of these experts, the 16th city suddenly became turbulent. Although the battle had yet to break out, the oppressive feeling that faintly filled the void was almost tangible, giving people a feeling that a storm was coming. Everyone knew that once the battle broke out, it would be earth-shattering. One expert after another flew through the air, and many of them were old monsters who had been famous throughout the universe for over 100 chaos cycles. Their arrival caused quite a stir. There was a strange rabbit Buddha in a kasaya with a rabbit head, a Titan race giant who ruled over a part of the universe, and a descendant of the dark demon from the abyss of the universe. All of them had extremely powerful auras. It was an eye-opening experience for Jian Wushuang. The vastness of the universe far exceeded his imagination. If he had not been a perfect-level special living being, he would not have been able to fight against these geniuses. I'm afraid it'll be difficult to get the God Sealing Tablet this time. Commander Mountain Shaker shook his head, his expression extremely grave. Apart from the future Commander Buxu, there were a total of 6 great commanders under the Overlord who had come to fight for the God Sealing Tablet. Each of them was an expert close to the level of an unparalleled ruler. Among them, the first commander, Han Feng, had unfathomable strength and was probably comparable to an unparalleled ruler. In the universe, as long as a supreme being did not appear, such a powerful force would basically be invincible. However, in the 16th city it did not pose any threat at all. The smell of fire in the air was getting stronger and stronger. Everyone was biding their time, holding back their momentum. At this moment, I'll take 3 of these 5 investiture of the gods. I don't care how you fight for the other 2. The Golden Crow Prince said expressionlessly. Then, the Golden Crow Prince reached out his right hand and grabbed the 5 investiture of the gods. In his hand, countless golden flames gathered and formed a giant arm, which crossed the void and grabbed the investiture of the gods. When everyone saw this, their faces were filled with hesitation. As the eldest son of the Emperor Jinwu, Emperor Jinwu's strength was unfathomable, and he was strong enough to rival the big shots. No one wanted to be the first to attack and offend Emperor Jinwu. Commander Mountain Shaker, are we just going to let him take the 3 pieces of the investiture of the gods? Jian Wushuang asked with a frown. Commander Mountain Shaker's expression flickered. He glanced at Commander Han Feng, who did not speak, and replied, "We'll listen to Commander Han Feng." Jian Wushuang nodded and continued to look at Emperor Jinwu. Although the Golden Crow Emperor was strong, there were also a few whose auras were not weaker than his. He believed that someone would stop him. As expected, just as the Golden Crow Prince's flaming hand was about to touch the investiture of the gods, a cold and deep voice suddenly sounded. "Golden Crow, aren't you being a little too optimistic?" Bang! In the next moment, a huge black waterfall slashed out from the crowd. This ribbon seemed to come from the 9 Serenities hell, full of coldness and evil. It directly shattered the Golden Crow Prince's flaming hand. "Oh!" The Golden Crow Prince raised an eyebrow and turned his head to look at the place where the bolt of lightning had come from. A tall man in black armor and carrying a giant axe walked out of the crowd. This man had a pair of red eyes and a horned helmet. His face was extremely ugly, as if he was a demon from hell. A descendant of the dark demons in the abyss? The Golden Crow Prince narrowed his eyes. The abyss was located in the extreme north of the universe. It was desolate all year round, and no one dared to set foot there. The only thing there was a river of blood that had flowed for countless chaos cycles. The river of blood was so incredibly corrosive that even rulers would be completely corroded in the space of a few breaths, their bodies and souls destroyed. The land of the abyss was also known as the Forbidden Land of the universe. Only the descendants of the dark demons born from the blood river could survive there. "You want to stop me?" The Golden Crow Prince's voice gradually turned cold. The dark demon descendant twisted his neck and took out the giant axe on his back. He said in a deep voice, "I've killed more than 1 or 2 golden crows. Come, let this lord see what's so different about the Golden Crow royal clan." As soon as he finished speaking, the descendant of the dark demon took a step forward and his body shot forward. The giant axe in his hand was like Pangu splitting open the sky as he hacked down at the Golden Crow Prince. On his back, a pair of blood wings spread open. "You're looking for death." The Golden Crow Prince's expression turned cold, and the 2 tridents in his hands were instantly covered in golden flames. He streaked a beautiful trail of flames in the air toward the dark demon descendant. In an instant, the battle between the Golden Crow Prince and the descendant of the dark demon was like a fuse that lit up, and the entire battlefield was filled with the sounds of battle. "Kill!" At this moment, countless ultimate rulers roared and charged at the 5 gods' sealing monuments. The massacre began. This battle was bound to shake the heavens and earth. Only the strongest among the rulers could live to the end of this battle. They could step over the piles of corpses and write a glorious epic to obtain the god's sealing tablet. "Blood Sword, it's our turn," Commander Mountain Shaker said in a deep voice with a solemn expression. In the distance, the blood god's forces, led by Blood Rain, were already charging over. "Han Feng, 500,000 years ago, you managed to escape with your life in Crooked Cloud Star area. Let's see how you escape this time." Bloodrain's lips curled into a devilish smile as he looked at Commander Freezing Wind with a mocking gaze. Commander Han Feng did not reply. He only coldly said, "Kill." In an instant, The two camps were engaged in a fierce battle. Pong pong pong. Boom. 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 Countless magical powers and secret skills were cast, causing the void to explode. At that moment, he saw Maluo Yengu leading a group of Maluo clansmen and walking toward Jian Wushuang. Instantly, the six commanders' expressions changed. It was already extremely difficult for them to face the Blood God's camp. How could they have any energy left to face the Maluo clan? Could it be that the Maluo clan has allied with the Blood God? Commander Mountain Shaker's expression was extremely ugly. Jian Wushuang, who was standing beside him, took a deep breath, shook his head and said, "No, I'm not. They're here for me." "Is he here to find you? Blood Sword? Did you offend the Maluo clan?" The commander was startled and asked hesitantly. Jian Wushuang did not reply. Instead, he clenched his right hand and the repaired Wuxia divine sword appeared in his hand. In the next moment, Jian Wushuang took a step forward and his entire body suddenly soared into the sky. He flew past the two camps that were fighting each other and faced the approaching Maluo Yengu. Maluo Yengu stopped in his tracks. He then twisted his neck and said, "Little guy, the last battle in the 8th city doesn't count. Let's try again this time." Jian Wushuang nodded and replied, "Then come." Whoosh! A ray of heaven-opening sword light condensed on the Wuxia divine sword and slashed toward Maluo. Maluo looked at this seemingly familiar sword. His pupils first contracted before he burst out laughing. "Ha ha ha, Blood Sword. It seems that you have improved again during this period of time." The 16th city had been completely reduced to a battlefield. Explosions kept coming from the void, and the earth was in a mess. From time to time, one could see the ultimate rulers fall. This scene was extremely spectacular. The ultimate ruler, who could dominate a region in the outside world, was like a cabbage on the street in the 16th city, worthless. Jian Wushuang and Maluo Yengu stood opposite each other while the other members of the Maluo clan guarded the side. They seemed to have a tacit understanding to prevent the flames of war from spreading over and affecting the battle between Jian Wushuang and Maluo Yengu. Jian Wushuang could feel that the aura of Maluo Yengu was much stronger than when he was in the 8th city. The boy, He Tang, who was sitting on his shoulder, had changed from his pale face to a solemn one. He was like a reincarnated Buddha, full of holy intent. "Split open the sky!" Jian Wushuang shouted and no longer concealed his aura. The aura of the 4th level origin of sword principle burst out and the sharp sword essence shot up to the sky, as if it could break the sky. A blood-red sword light condensed on the Wuxia divine sword in Jian Wushuang's hand. It drew a beautiful arc in the air and slashed toward Maluo Yengu. What rang out were the wails of gods and devils, and the low groans of Buddhas. "Good!" A glint flashed across Maluo Yengu's eyes. He roared in anger and stomped his right foot heavily on the ground. Maluo trampling. Boom! Immediately, an extremely violent force gushed out, and the entire earth began to tremble and split. A vibrating light wave spread out like a halo. At this moment, countless ultimate rulers who were fighting around the two of them could not help but spring up. Some of the weaker ones even had their divine bodies instantly collapse. Jian Wushuang, who was standing in the middle of the light wave, could not help but frown. This move was once again used by Maluo Yengu and it was several times stronger than before. Suppress. Jian Wushuang stomped his right foot heavily and the divine power in his entire body instantly gushed out. He resisted the waves of shock waves that swept over wave after wave. At the same time, the heaven-opening sword light that Jian Wushuang had released earlier had already landed on Maluo Yengu's body. In the past few years, not only had Maluo become stronger, but Jian Wushuang had also not wasted any time. His power had also improved greatly. Bang! The sky-opening sword radiance instantly slashed down on the right arm of Maluo Yengu, forcing him to take a few steps back. A trace of dark golden blood seeped out from his arm. He looked down at his arm and then looked up at Jian Wushuang with a touch of admiration in his eyes. He said, "Blood Sword, I have to say that you're the most powerful sword master I've ever met. If it wasn't for Heavenly Snake, you would have become the best friend of my Maluo clan." Hearing this, Jian Wushuang smiled slightly. From the bottom of his heart, he had a good impression of this Maluo Yengu. Although he was his enemy, he did things in an open and above-board manner. He did not take advantage of the fact that there were other Maluo clansmen here to bully others. Enough nonsense. Let's fight to our heart's content. Universe law, tenfold willpower. Jian Wushuang laughed loudly. He did not hold back his divine power and released it all. Along with the tenfold willpower given to him by the laws of the universe, he slashed out thousands of sword chi like a splash of ink. Seeing this, Maluo Yengu laughed out loud. A huge force gathered in his arms and he punched Jian Wushuang. All right, blood sword. After this battle, if you and I can both survive, I'll definitely invite you to drink to your heart's content. The two of them instantly engaged in battle. Waves of destructive power and sword intent that tore the sky intertwined and collided, exploding into brilliant sparks on the battlefield of the 16th city. Jian Wushuang felt extremely carefree and his attacks became fiercer. At this moment, the entire battlefield of the 16th city was already in a state of chaos. Gradually, as the ultimate ruler fell, some people began to stand out. Almsgiver, the Buddha is merciful. Please do not commit the sin of murder again. There was a strange rabbit Buddha with a rabbit head in a blood-red cassock. His expression was solemn, and his eyes were filled with compassion, as if he was pitying the people of the world. In the next moment, he waved the Buddha's staff in his hand and directly smashed the head of an expert who was close to an invincible ruler. Sigh, this poor monk has saved another killing sin. Buddha is merciful. He let out a soft sigh and continued to walk toward the other ultimate ruler. The surrounding ultimate ruler's eyes began to twitch. This guy was telling them to kill less while he was smashing other people's divine bodies. In just a few minutes, the number of ultimate rulers that had died at his hands could not be counted with two hands. Where did this abnormal person come from? Everyone was terrified. On the other side, a handsome young man wearing a snow-white robe and a snow-white vest on his left shoulder, with a pale blue crescent moon between his eyebrows, slashed out with a thin blade in his hand. Waves of blade light flashed continuously, and the area within 100 feet of him had been completely turned into a dead land. I think he's the fiend Blade Moonslayer. Moonslayer? The god of death who once slaughtered the 3 major galaxies. Why is he here? Further away. It was extremely close to the center of the God-Sealing Tablet area. The Golden Crow Prince and the Dark Devil's descendant continued to fight. The Golden Crow Prince's eyes had already turned into golden flames. As he swung the 2 tridents in his hands, they brought with them the power to burn the world. One after another, apocalyptic fire dragons roared out from the tridents, burning the void. A dirty and pitiful worm that only deserves to live in the abyss. You are so lowly. Do you think you are worthy of stopping me? The Golden Crow Prince looked down at the Dark Demon Descendant with an indifferent expression. The Dark Demon Descendant waved his giant axe in the air and hacked the fire dragon into pieces. He had a pair of huge blood wings on his back and a river of blood flowed under his feet. The next moment, he twisted his neck, making a cracking sound, and then laughed in a low voice. Put away your disgusting sense of superiority and obediently die. Roar! He stomped his right foot heavily and his entire body shot up into the sky. The giant axe in his hand instantly glowed brightly as he hacked down toward Emperor Golden Crow. Humph! He snorted. The Golden Crow Prince snorted coldly, squinted his eyes and shouted, Innate divine ability, Eye of the Burning Flame. Whoosh! At the center of his brows, a golden vertical eye suddenly opened. The battle was getting more and more intense, and the dark mass of ultimate rulers that had blotted out the sky was rapidly being reduced in number. Those who were still fighting on the battlefield were all supreme ultimate rulers. Han Feng, Mountain Shaker, and the other 5 commanders attacked Blood Rain together. Blood Rain was not at a disadvantage even though he was facing 5 people. The Blood Sword. After the battle, Commander Mountain Shaker turned to look at Jian Wushuang, who was fighting with Maluo Yengu, and a hint of worry flashed in his eyes. Maluo's charge. Sundering stars. Bang! The Wuxia divine sword in Jian Wushuang's hand collided with the sharp and curved horns of Maluo Yengu. Suddenly, a deafening sound rang out. The star-slashing swordsmanship, which had been pushed to perfection by Jian Wushuang, instantly turned into a 5,000-foot sword rainbow that pressed across the void and pierced through the sun and moon. The brilliant sword power destroyed everything. The sword slashed at the pair of sharp and curved horns on Maluo Yengu's head, instantly severing them. Like a knife cutting through tofu, a section of Maluo's pair of ox horns was directly cut off. Divine blood spurted all over the sky, and a rain of blood fell on the battlefield of the 16th city. Commander Yengu! Commander Yengu! In an instant, the expressions of the other members of the Maluo clan who were guarding at the side changed. They cried out anxiously and immediately wanted to rush over to help Maluo Yengu. "I'm fine." A stream of divine blood flowed out of his mouth. He waved his hand at the people of the Maluo clan, indicating that it was fine. Then, he took a deep breath, looked at Jian Wushuang, and said in a deep voice, "Blood Sword, it's time for you to see the innate divine ability of our Maluo clan." He then turned to look at He Tang and said, "Black Peak, I'll leave the rest to you." After he finished speaking, he slowly closed his eyes. At the same time, the eyes of the boy with braids sitting on his shoulder opened. Jian Wushuang frowned and a faint sense of fear welled up. The boy's eyes were black, and there was a small white in the center of his eyes. "Blood Sword, our Maluo clan doesn't cultivate any remarkable abilities or secret techniques. We only rely on our innate physical strength and the accompanying black armored child." The next moment, the boy with plates spoke. However, the strange thing was that he was silent when he spoke. On the other hand, although Maluo Yengu did not speak, the voice came from his mouth. His voice was no longer as low as before, but it had become a little sharp. "I understand." Jian Wushuang took a deep breath and his expression turned serious. "Blood Sword, as long as you can withstand one of my moves, we will be even. From then on, you will be a friend of the Maluo clan." Maluo Yengu continued. "All right," he said. Jian Wushuang nodded. He held the Wuxia divine sword in his hand tightly and waited quietly for the strongest move of Maluo Yengu. Innate divine ability, Maluo's wrath. "Die!" Maluo Yengu raised his head and roared in anger. The black armored child on his shoulder began to rapidly form hand seals. As the black armored boy began to form hand seals, the space in front of his chest began to compress. An extremely concentrated black light wave began to congregate on the chest of Maluo Yengu. "Blood Sword, take it! Die!" Maluo Yengu roared in anger and stomped his right foot forward. In an instant, the black light wave was like a laser that could destroy space and shot toward Jian Wushuang. The black laser was as thick as a bucket and was extremely fast. Everything that was touched by the black laser was turned into nothing. An unlucky ultimate ruler reacted slightly slower and was grazed by the black laser. He died and turned into dust. Is this the innate divine ability of the Maluo clan? Jian Wushuang's expression was solemn as he used his own talent. Innate divine power. Original universe. Innate divine ability. Life intimidation. Immediately, two realms with extremely strong suppressive forces descended. In this realm, Jian Wushuang slowly raised the Wuxia divine sword. The fourth level of sword principle origin, mixed with an extremely high level of universe law, exploded. Slash star. Bang. The silver sword rainbow condensed once again. However, this time, the silver sword rainbow had already expanded to 10,000 feet under the various forces. What kind of concept was a sword rainbow that was 10,000 feet long? This sword directly covered the entire void of the battlefield of the 16th city, covering the sky and the sun. It was mighty to the extreme. Slash! Along with Jian Wushuang's shout, the sword rainbow that covered the sky suddenly slashed down. Pu Chi Chi! The silver-white sword beam and the black laser beam collided together. At that moment, the world seemed to have been divided into two images. On the left was the image of Maluo Yengu, who was covered in black laser light, and on the right was Jian Wushuang, who was holding a silver-white sword rainbow that was nearly 10,000 feet long. The silver sword rainbow, which had always been successful, finally met its match this time. The two continued to wrestle. Jian Wushuang's right foot stomped heavily on the ground, but he was forced to retreat by the huge force of the black laser. As for Maluo, he was in an even worse state. He kept growling and his huge body started to crack bit by bit. At that moment, many of the ultimate rulers who were fighting in the 16th city stopped fighting and looked at Maluo and Jian Wushuang. Buddha is merciful. These two must have killed many people. The rabbit Buddha held the Buddhist staff in his hand and put his palms together. He let out a long sigh, bemoaning the state of the universe and pitying the fate of mankind. Later on, let this poor monk save them from their sin of killing. On the other side, the handsome young man in a snow-white robe and a marten fur waistcoat on his left shoulder raised his head to look at the battle between Jian Wushuang and Maluo after killing an ultimate ruler with one stroke of his blade. His eyes narrowed. What a terrifying sword intent! Not only the two of them, but there were also gazes from all directions that were fixed on Jian Wushuang and Maluo. Bang! In the end, a huge explosion sounded, setting off white waves. Jian Wushuang and Maluo were both blocked by the smoke and dust that filled the air. They were surrounded by violent and chaotic divine power, and no one dared to get close. The smoke and dust gradually dispersed. A shocking scene happened. He saw that Maluo Yengu was half-kneeling on the ground. A long stream of divine blood was flowing out of his mouth. The Wuxia divine sword in Jian Wushuang's hand stopped just a few inches above the head of the ancient flame. Victory or defeat, victory or defeat. It was obvious at a glance. Blood sword, you win, said Maluo Yengu as he panted heavily and raised his head with some difficulty. Thanks for letting me win. Jian Wushuang smiled slightly but did not intend to kill him. Instead, he turned his eyes and looked in the direction of the five gods sealing monuments. The battle between the Golden Crow Prince and the Dark Demon Descendant was already drawing to an end. Both of them were unrivaled rulers, but it was a pity that the Golden Crow Prince was the eldest son of the Golden Crow Great Emperor, a descendant of the Dark Devil born from the Blood River, but he was still a bit weaker. Die, you filthy and lowly worm. The Golden Crow's eyes were blazing with fire. He glanced indifferently at the Dark Demon Descendant's body, which was riddled with holes and on the verge of collapse. His voice was neither happy nor sad, and it did not contain any emotion. The Dark Demon Descendant's giant axe was already broken into two. He raised his head and looked at the Golden Crow Prince, his eyes full of unwillingness. Just as the Golden Crow Prince was about to kill the Dark Demon Descendant, suddenly, a sword shadow rode the divine sword and shot toward the five investiture of the gods. The sword shadow was Jian Wushuang, who had defeated Maluo Yengu. Who is it? Emperor Jin Wu was so furious that he reached out his hand to grab Jian Wushuang. However, Jian Wushuang's speed was so fast that he missed. You're looking for death. You? The Golden Crow Prince was instantly enraged. His handsome face could no longer remain calm as he stared at the sword shadow that was flying toward him. Not only the Golden Crow Prince, but also the Rabbit Buddha, the Demon Blade, the Moonslayer, and the 9 magnates all stopped what they were doing and looked at the investiture of the gods. Jian Wushuang rushed to the 5 investiture of the gods and looked down at the 5 investiture of the gods, which were emitting a faint pressure. With a wave of his hand, he put the 5 investiture of the gods into his interspatial ring. So far, he had 5 god sealing tablets. In addition to the previous investiture of the gods, Jian Wushuang had a total of 6 investiture of the gods. It could be said that he was the person who had obtained the most number of investiture of the gods, apart from the 9 giants. The next moment, Jian Wushuang turned around and looked at the people below him. Who is this person? Kill him. Take back the god sealing tablet. How audacious! Hand over the god sealing tablet and we'll spare your life. On the battlefield of the 16th city, there were roars of anger. Endless killing intent swept toward Jian Wushuang. Under the impact of this killing intent, even an ordinary ultimate ruler would be unable to stand steadily. Blood sword. Commander Mountain Shaker looked at Jian Wushuang with a dumbfounded expression. He did not expect that Jian Wushuang would be so bold as to take the 5 investiture of the gods for himself. There were so many people present, and no one was a fool. They knew how to take the initiative and seize the god sealing tablet. The reason why he did not do so was because he did not want to be the target of everyone and be besieged. Therefore, everyone had a tacit understanding not to take the 5 investiture of the gods, because even if they did, they would not be treasures, but talismans that would hasten their death. Even the Golden Crow Prince only dared to take 3 pieces of the investiture of the gods and kept 2. Even so, he still did not succeed. This was like a delicious cake that countless people were fighting for. The first thing to do was to kick out the weak, and then the last strong one would be eaten one by one. Everyone would then share it based on their strength. What did Jian Wushuang do? Not only did he take the cake for himself, he even flipped the table. There was no way to continue the game. Thinking of this, the commander looked at Jian Wushuang with worry. Although the blood sword is strong, it's still too young. He let out a long sigh in his heart. Commander Han Feng, who was in charge of leading the team this time, shook his head and said, "Blood sword, you were too reckless this time." The situation was just as Commander Mountain Shaker had guessed. Countless ultimate rulers roared and charged at Jian Wushuang. Fortunately, the Rabbit Buddha, the Moonslayer, the Golden Crow Emperor, the Dark Demon Descendant, and the other unparalleled rulers who had recovered during the break did not rush to attack Jian Wushuang. They stood in the void and looked at Jian Wushuang coldly. Kill! Countless ultimate rulers rode their escape lights toward Jian Wushuang. Among them were the leaders of the 8 magnates, including Bloodrain. Jian Wushuang even saw a few familiar faces. For example, the ruler Grotto Profound, who had said that he would kill Jian Wushuang the next time he saw him, and Hong Yi, who had been scared away by his sword. Blood sword. I had originally decided not to be your enemy after seeing your battle with Maluo Yengu. Unfortunately, you just had to break the rules. And those who break the rules often don't have a good ending. Overlord Baron River, clad in black armor and holding a heavenly halberd, took the lead and slashed down at Jian Wushuang's head, splitting the heavens and splitting the earth. Even the Overlord's subordinates, who were on the same side as Jian Wushuang, remained silent and only dared to watch from a distance when faced with the large group of aggressive ultimate rulers. Commander Mountain Shaker opened his mouth to say something, but when he saw Commander Han Feng's cold expression, he tactfully swallowed the words that were already at the tip of his tongue. Jian Wushuang's expression was cold. Looking at the black mass of at least hundreds of ultimate rulers, he took a deep breath and lowered his head to look at the Wuxia divine sword in his hand. The current situation had already been within his expectations when he decided to snatch the god-sealing tablet. He was already mentally prepared. Then come. Jian Wushuang lowered his head and muttered to himself. The next moment, he suddenly raised his head, and the fighting spirit in his eyes was condensed to the extreme. He could even faintly feel that his blood, which had been dormant for a long time, was starting to boil. Only a carefree battle could make him feel the desire in the depths of his soul. A swordsman was born to fight and was mad for the sword. Song Feng had once said that sword cultivators should press forward with indomitable will and have no fear in their hearts. Kill! Jian Wushuang uttered a cold word. In the next moment, Jian Wushuang moved. His first target was the halberd-wielding ruler Baron River. Blood sword, die! Ruler Baron let out a savage laugh. However, before he could strike with his halberd, Jian Wushuang had already brushed past him. A moment later, the savage smile on the ruler Baron River's face froze. How is that possible? This was the last thought that flashed through the ruler Baron River's mind. Then, his thoughts fell into a deep sleep in the endless darkness. Jian Wushuang spat out 3 words. The first one. This was just the beginning. Jian Wushuang moved nimbly, and the Wuxia divine sword followed him, mercilessly reaping the lives of the ultimate ruler. Jian Wushuang fully activated the 4th level of sword principle origin. Wuxia was covered with a layer of blood, which was the sign of the completion of slaughter sword principle. The second one, the third one, the fourth one. the massacre began. When Jian Wushuang fought without restraint, the ultimate rulers were as easy as chopping melons and vegetables in his eyes. In the battlefield of the 16th city, Jian Wushuang held the Wuxia divine sword in his hand and slaughtered his way through the crowd. Every time Jian Wushuang slashed with his sword, he would take a life. Among them were some geniuses from the major races of the universe. God's blood covered the earth and dyed the sky red. 89. When Jian Wushuang used sundering stars to kill blood rain and spat out such a number, everyone was terrified. They held their treasures tightly and did not dare to attack Jian Wushuang. Walala! Jian Wushuang took a step forward, and they took a step back. If one were to look down from the sky, they would be able to witness this extremely shocking scene. Facing Jian Wushuang, who was alone, the dense mass of ultimate rulers was actually being pushed back by Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang's eyes were cold and his black hair was flowing down. His divine body was also covered with cuts from knives and axes. However, with Jian Wushuang's great divine power, the wounds recovered very quickly. Even the Rabbit Buddha, the Moonslayer, and the Golden Crow Emperor, who had not made a move yet, frowned slightly at this scene. No wonder this person was so arrogant. He has the battle power of an invincible ruler. Not only that, even an ordinary unparalleled ruler wouldn't be able to do this. That's right, tree will wither and die, and man's strength will run out. An ordinary ruler's divine power won't be enough to last for so long. He's a special life form. A special life form? Yes, only the divine power of special creatures is far beyond that of cultivators in the same realm. They can achieve the state of this person, where their divine power is endless. The rulers were all discussing this matter. This was the depths of the universe, and special life forms were no longer strange. However, although they were praising him, they did not look too serious. After all, which of those who could reach the level of an unparalleled ruler didn't have their own unparalleled trump cards? Although Jian Wushuang's performance was strong, it was not enough to make them treat him seriously. They were merely peak ultimate rulers. If they wanted to, they could kill them at any time. That's good, the Golden Crow Prince sneered. Let this man clean up the trash first, so I don't have to dirty my hands. The Rabbit Buddha heaved a long sigh and put its palms together. The people of the world are foolish and have committed the sin of killing. It seems like I can only wash away the sins of the world with my devil-subduing Zen staff. Sigh, it's too difficult for me, he said, shaking his head. The handsome Moonslayer gently stroked the demonic sword at his waist with his thumb. He could feel that his demonic sword was almost unable to suppress its desire to kill Jian Wushuang. At the same time, at the entrance of the 11th city, a hunched monster with spikes on its back and green skin gradually formed. This person was Qiu Long. However, at this moment, the 9th city's city lord and the others who were being led by Qiu Long had disappeared. Instead, there was a black sandalwood box in his hand. The black sandalwood box was covered with mysterious divine patterns. It was tightly covered, so no one could see what was inside. As usual, when the people of the 9 magnates saw the newcomers arriving in the 8 cities, they surrounded them and tried to invite Qiu Long to join their camp. Hearing the noisy invitations, Qiu Long gradually frowned. You guys are really quarreling. As soon as he finished speaking, before they could react, Qiu Long had already attacked. So, I've decided to make you all shut up. The massacre had begun. A moment later, all the ultimate rulers at the entrance of the 11th city had died, leaving only Qiu Long standing. The cold disaster blew past, lifting his loose, sticky hair. He shook his head in boredom. Why are you all so weak? Can you tell me why? He sighed and opened the black sandalwood box in his hand. What was inside the box was a head, and this head was none other than Ruler Hao Jin. Ruler Hao Jin had not died yet. His face was ashen as he glared at Qiu Long. His eyes filled with shock and anger. Hee. Kid, didn't you want to enter the back 8 cities to find the blood sword? Now that you're here, tell me, how are you going to thank me? Said Qiu Long with a chuckle. You monster. Let me tell you, once I die, Lord Bloodsword will not let you off. Ruler Hao Jin gritted his teeth. squeezing these words out of them. Ha 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 ha. You won't let me go? Ha 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 ha. Qiu Long laughed arrogantly before his voice turned cold. Then I'm really looking forward to it. He closed the wooden box and looked around with interest. So these are the 8 cities? Let's see where that blood sword is hiding. Qiu Long's eyes flickered as if he was a hunter looking for his prey. Then, he shook his head and said, Fine. Let's search city by city. Blood sword, you better hide well. If I find you, the game will be over. On the battlefield of the 16th city, Jian Wushuang's expression was cold as he used the star-slashing sword again. With this sword, he killed more than 30 ultimate rulers. In the end, the final rulers collapsed and retreated. Jian Wushuang did not give chase. Instead, he sat down cross-legged and placed the Wuxia divine sword in front of his knees to recover his divine power. Beneath him, countless non-humankind corpses had already piled up into a mountain, forming a mountain. Countless people looked at the Jingguan, which was made of piles of corpses, and felt a chill go straight to the top of their heads, their livers and galls splitting. Ruler Hong Yi was also mixed in with the retreating crowd, a look of relief on his face. Good. I didn't fight this person for Cangfeng last time. In the void, Jian Wushuang sat down with his legs crossed. His wide black robe had turned blood red. He looked like an Azura from hell, but his expression was still cold. As for Commander Mountain Shaker and the others, they were already dumbfounded. Even though he had repeatedly overestimated Jian Wushuang's combat power, he only realized now that he had still greatly underestimated Jian Wushuang. Although Jian Wushuang only had the cultivation of a 5th-stage ruler, he definitely had the fighting power of an unrivaled ruler. In fact, he even had an extremely absurd thought in his mind. Even if the Overlord came, he wouldn't be able to deal with so many ultimate rulers as easily as Jian Wushuang, right? He smacked his tongue and thought to himself. As for the Golden Crow Prince and the Rabbit Buddha, where Moonslayer and the other unparalleled rulers were standing. Are you just going to watch him take the 5 god sealing tablets? The dark demon descendant glanced at the Golden Crow Prince and said sarcastically. He can't take the god sealing tablet away. Emperor Jin Wu glanced at him indifferently and then strode toward Jian Wushuang. With one step, Emperor Jin Wu was already standing in the void in front of Jian Wushuang. He was handsome and had the mark of a golden crow between his eyebrows. He held 2 tridents in his hands and looked like a god. He looked down at Jian Wushuang and said indifferently, No matter who you are, I'll give you 2 choices. First, submit to me and I'll give you a piece of the investiture of the gods. Second, I'll kill you and take all the god sealing tablets from you. After him, the Rabbit Buddha, the Dark Demon Descendant, and the other unparalleled rulers also moved. No one wanted to let the Golden Crow Prince be the first. Benefactor, I see that you've committed heinous sins and will soon be plagued by karmic fire. Therefore, I advise you to quickly turn back, hand over the deification tablet, and convert to Buddha. The Rabbit Buddha put its hands together and said with a fake smile, Brat, you have another choice. You can cooperate with me. We'll kill our way out and then divide the god sealing tablet equally. What do you think? The dark demon descendant laughed sinisterly. However, he knew without even thinking that if Jian Wushuang really cooperated with him as he had said, the first person the dark demon descendant would kill would be him. The last invincible ruler, Slayer, was expressionless. His 5 slender fingers slowly grasped the handle of the demon's sword at his waist. He had proven his Tao through killing and had once slaughtered 3 major star areas. This time, he had come to the last 8 cities just to kill and drink blood. Jian Wushuang raised his head slowly and looked at them. Do you really want this god-sealing tablet? Jian Wushuang said indifferently. Your blood sword, right? The Golden Crow Prince frowned. I hate it when people play tricks in front of me. I'll give you 3 breaths to make your choice. After 3 breaths, I'll kill you regardless of whether you submit to me or not. Do you understand? Then, the Golden Crow Prince raised a finger and said coldly, 1 breath, 2 breaths. Without waiting for him to finish counting, Jian Wushuang laughed out loud, slapped the void with his right palm, and soared into the sky. If you want the God sealing tablet, then use your strength. After saying that, Jian Wushuang took a step forward and shot away like a cannonball. The Golden Crow Prince's eyes turned cold and he said, "You don't know how to appreciate favors." Bang! Emperor Jin Wu also took a leap and chased after Jian Wushuang. The two of them formed two beams of light in the air and shot into the distance. The Buddha is merciful, but he also has thunderous means. Benefactor, why are you so focused on your appearance? The rabbit Buddha sighed softly, but a crimson light flashed in its eyes. It took a step forward and suddenly turned into a bolt of lightning. After the rabbit Buddha, the dark demon descendant and killer also turned into a blood river and a cold moon, chasing after Jian Wushuang. At this moment, the four unrivaled rulers were chasing after Jian Wushuang at the same time. Jian Wushuang turned around and looked at them indifferently. A murderous intent flashed in his eyes. The four unrivaled rulers were strong. Any one of them was far stronger than Lord Jinan and the third prince, whom Jian Wushuang had killed in the Taro ruins. Even Jian Wushuang himself did not know if he could defeat the four unrivaled rulers without using Eternal Night. The reason why he had attracted these four people was so that if he was really forced to use his trump card, he could perform the sword move Eternal Night without being discovered. There were too many people here, and it was inevitable that some of them would recognize the Tarot Sword Manual. Once the outside world knew that Jian Wushuang had the Tarot Sword Manual, the whole universe would be shaken and rush to him. Blood sword, you can't escape. With two tridents in his hands, Emperor Jin Wu followed Jian Wushuang closely with a cold expression. Jian Wushuang looked back at him and did not say anything. He just pulled out a cold smile. At the battlefield of the 16th city, Commander Han Feng, what should we do now? Commander Han Shan asked as he looked at Jian Wushuang, Emperor Jin Wu, and the others who were flying away. What can we do? Commander Han Feng shook his head, a hint of helplessness flashing in his eyes. The combat power of these people had far exceeded the scope of what they could contend with. Commander Han Feng, Blood Sword is on our side after all. Are we just going to watch him get killed by the Golden Crow Prince and the others? The Commander Han Shan asked again unwillingly. Commander Han Feng was silent for a moment before he said indifferently, Mountain Shaker, if you want to die with the Blood Sword, then go alone. I still have to consider the lives of the others. He paused. Commander Han Feng continued. Blood Sword was confident that his cultivation was high. He did not follow our orders. Now he is being hunted down. It is his own fault. If he really dies, he can only blame himself. When Commander Mountain Shaker heard this, a hint of hesitation flashed across his face. However, in that moment of hesitation, Jian Wushuang and the others had already disappeared into the sky. Commander Mountain Shaker could only sigh dejectedly and say no more. At the same time, in the 11th city, outside the Overlord's divine palace, a hunchbacked, skinny monster with spikes on its back walked over with a black sandalwood box in its hand. Who are you? This is the Overlord's territory. Those who are idle, quickly retreat. The two ultimate rulers who were responsible for guarding the gate of the divine palace frowned. They crossed their spears and blocked Qiu Long's way. Qiu Long lifted his hair that was hanging down from his cheeks and squinted at the four majestic words, Overlord Divine Palace. He then turned to the two ultimate rulers and said with a smile, Little guys, I want to ask you about a person. Who is it? The two ultimate sovereigns, upon hearing this, frowned and asked back, Is the blood sword in this divine palace? The two ultimate sovereigns immediately sneered. So you're looking for Lord Bloodsword. Lord Bloodsword is our 7th commander, and you can't ask about him. I'll give you one last piece of advice. If you leave now, I'll pretend that nothing happened. Otherwise, don't blame us for being impolite with our divine spears. Qiu Long laughed when he heard that. He looked at the two of them with interest and asked, Oh? How impolite? The two ultimate rulers looked at each other and grinned hideously. They raised their divine spears high and hacked down at Qiu Long. You'll know it now. Looking at the two divine spears, Qiu Long let out a low laugh. What an interesting little fellow. Clang. The The two divine spears struck Qiu Long's body, but not even a white mark could be seen. The two ultimate rulers' expressions changed. Before they could change their moves, two black chains shot out from behind Qiu Long and pierced through them. Since the two of you aren't willing to talk, then I'll find someone who's willing to. Qiu Long raised his head, glanced at the four words, Overlord's Divine Palace, and then walked inside step by step. After a while, walala, countless divine armor guards held divine spears and shot over from all directions, looking at Qiu Long with solemn expressions. The Overlord has ordered that anyone who dares to trespass the Overlord's divine palace will be killed without mercy. Commander Wuxia stood at the head with a cold expression. With a wave of his hand, the divine armor guards all charged at Qiu Long. Qiu Long looked at the divine armor guards and chuckled. You're really courageous. Whoosh! Countless black chains shot out from Qiu Long's back like javelins and smashed at the godly armor guards. In an instant, the Overlord's divine palace was filled with screams. God's blood filled the air, and shrill cries of despair rose and fell. Commander Wuxia's entire head was forcefully broken off, and he tossed it around like a ball. The great Overlord's divine palace was a sea of blood and corpses. With his hands behind his back, Qiu Long leisurely walked toward the great hall where the great Overlord was. The heavily guarded Overlord's divine palace was like a walk in the park under Qiu Long's feet. No one could stop him for a moment. It was as if he had entered a no-man's land. After half an incense's time, Qiu Long stepped into the Overlord's shrine. This was where the Overlord was. At this moment, the Overlord divine palace was quiet. The seats of the 7 commanders were all empty. The Overlord sat on his dragon throne with his eyes closed. His chi and blood were boiling like the sun. Clatter, tap tap, clatter, tap tap. Hearing the footsteps, the Overlord's eyes suddenly opened, and a divine light flashed through his eyes. Eh? You didn't stop him? The Overlord's brows furrowed, and a look of displeasure flashed across his face. So many people, yet they could not stop a single person? However, he did not care much about it. Or rather, as one of the 9 magnates, there were only a few people in the 8 cities that he cared about. However, Qiu Long was obviously not in this category. Qiu Long raised his head and looked at the Overlord. He shrugged and said with a smile, Big guy, your men are really rude. I only wanted to say one sentence and they wanted to kill me. Tell me, how are you going to compensate me? Compensation. Hearing this, the Overlord was so angry that he laughed. This person had killed all of his subordinates, and now he was asking for compensation? Also, he was the possessor of the undying Overlord body, one of the 9 big shots of the last 8 cities, and this person actually called him Big Guy. Go to hell. The Overlord sneered and stomped with his right foot. His whole body suddenly flew up and his right fist condensed into a sun, smashing towards Qiu Long. This punch was just a casual punch from the Overlord, but it was like the beating of the ancient heavenly court's war drum. It caused the space to shake and a few cracks to appear. This punch was enough to directly blow up a star. This punch was filled with the might of an invincible ruler. However, Qiu Long just stretched out his palm and grabbed at the Overlord's right fist. Bang! With a muffled sound, the Overlord's punch hit the dragon's palm. The huge force spread out and directly shattered the Overlord's divine palace. With the two of them as the center, the ground within 100 feet collapsed. Such a terrifying punch landed on Qiu Long's outstretched palm, but it could not advance any further. What? The Overlord's expression changed. You're also rude. Qiu Long shook his head and clenched his fingers. He then grabbed the Overlord's fist and threw it out. In an instant, the Overlord was sent flying, and his body smashed a long ravine on the ground. The Overlord jumped up from the dust, his face extremely gloomy. What do you want? The Overlord asked coldly. At the same time, the power in his body began to condense, and his skin began to be covered with mysterious runes that were filled with a vast and ancient aura. He had activated the immortal tyrant body. I'm asking you, where is the blood sword? Qiu Long twisted his neck and asked, You're looking for the blood sword? The Overlord's eyes narrowed. On the battlefield of the 16th city, several escaping lights chased after Jian Wushuang and flew quickly above the 9 heavens. "I'd like to see where you can escape to," the Golden Crow Prince said with an indifferent expression. Just as he finished speaking, bang! Jian Wushuang's charging figure suddenly stopped. "Oh? You're not running." The Golden Crow Prince laughed scornfully and stopped as well. The Rabbit Buddha, the Moonslayer, the Dark Demon Descendant, and the others changed their figures and surrounded Jian Wushuang in a square. "When did I say I was going to escape?" Jian Wushuang stood in the void with his hands behind his back and his eyes swept across the faces of the 4 people. "Blood Sword, I've given you a chance, but you didn't cherish it. Now, don't blame me for being merciless. Let's go," Emperor Jin Wu said indifferently. Then he took a step forward and charged at Jian Wushuang with 2 tridents in his hands. He waved his halberd and countless divine flames surged out from the 2 tridents, turning into a sun-swallowing fire dragon that roared across the world. The Golden Crow race was born in the sun and stars. They bathed in the divine sun fire all year round and grew by absorbing the divine sun fire. They were the strongest race in the universe. As for the Golden Crow Emperor, he was the eldest son of the Golden Crow Monarch, a supreme expert. From this, one could see how terrifying his halberd was. If it was in the outside world, it was enough to burn a galaxy into nothingness. "The Buddha is merciful, I can't bear to kill." The Rabbit Buddha heaved a long sigh and looked as if he was bemoaning the state of the universe and pitying the fate of mankind. However, he did not hesitate to smash the demon-subduing Zen staff in his hand toward Jian Wushuang. This strike was simple and heavy, and the golden ring on the staff made a strange sound. Then, the sound of Buddha surged as if a great Buddha had descended between heaven and earth. He struck down with his giant hand to punish evil. The dark demon descendant laughed wildly. He pulled with both hands and a blood river was drawn out from the void and surged toward Jian Wushuang. As for the handsome young man, the demon blade, Moonslayer, he did not say a word. Instead, he pulled out the demon blade in his hand. A flash of coldness flashed across Moonslayer's face. Then, an extremely fast saber light, like a lightning tearing the night sky, quickly folded the void and slashed at Jian Wushuang. In an instant, the 4 unrivaled rulers attacked Jian Wushuang at the same time. Jian Wushuang's black hair was flying in the air, facing the shocking attacks that came from 4 directions. Although his eyes were full of fighting intent, his heart was extremely heavy, and he did not relax at all. "Sundering stars!" Jian Wushuang shouted coldly, and his eyes were as sharp as an eagle's. He immediately activated his divine power that was more than 12,000 times stronger and the willpower that was 10 times stronger given by the laws of the universe. He turned into a silver sword rainbow that was nearly 10,000 feet long. Jian Wushuang flipped his right hand and the sword rainbow in his hand swept out to meet the 4 unparalleled rulers' shocking attacks. Boom! However, the star-slashing sword rainbow, which was usually invincible, only lasted for a few breaths of time when facing the joint attack of these 4 people before it was instantly defeated. But a few breaths of time was enough. Jian Wushuang took advantage of this gap and stomped his right foot heavily, charging toward the dark demon descendant. Of the 4 unparalleled hegemons, the Golden Crow Imperial Prince was the strongest, and the dark demon descendant was already a bit weaker than them. Moreover, he had also been heavily injured, making him the easiest to kill. Divine power ignition. Without hesitation, Jian Wushuang performed the dragon-destroying secret skill and his strength increased greatly. In a flash, he appeared in front of the dark demon descendant. What? While the dark demon descendant was still in a daze, Jian Wushuang's Wuxia divine sword had already slashed down at him. "The first one to die will be you." The dark demon descendant's expression changed slightly when he saw this menacing sword. He had not expected that he would be the first target of Jian Wushuang. Whoosh! Without waiting for the dark demon descendant to react, Jian Wushuang's speed was extremely fast, and the sharp sword light directly slashed down, splitting the dark demon descendant into 2. However, the strange thing was that before Jian Wushuang's sword essence could burst out, and minced the dark demon descendant's divine body. His body automatically disintegrated and turned into a pool of blood. In the next moment, the pool of blood retreated, and the dark demon descendant's body reappeared. Blood sword, you deserve to die. The dark demon descendant's face turned gloomy. He grabbed with his right hand, and a blood-red spear condensed in his hand. At the same time, a hint of shock and anger flashed through his heart. If it were not for the fact that the Dark Demon clan was nurtured by the Blood River and could disperse into blood water at any time, Jian Wushuang's sword attack would have really made him fail. However, although Jian Wushuang's stroke did not kill him, he had to pay a heavy price for using the Blood River secret skill. At this time, the Golden Crow Prince and the others had arrived again. The Golden Crow Imperial Prince's body was burning with flames, and the Golden Crow mark on his forehead became more and more demonic. He held 2 tridents in his hands, and like a god of war from the ancient heavenly court, he stepped forward and slashed. Blood sword, give up your futile struggle. It's your honor to die under my halberd, the Golden Crow Prince said coldly. Jian Wushuang's eyes narrowed. First, he slashed 3 times to force the dark demon descendants away. Then, he suddenly turned around and looked at the shocking attack that was coming at him. He sneered and said, "It's your honor to die under my sword." As soon as he finished speaking, Jian Wushuang pointed his Wuxia divine sword at Emperor Jin Wu. He did not retreat, but instead, he attacked him. "You're so stubborn." A cold look flashed across the Golden Crow Prince's face. The golden divine fire on his 2 tridents became more and more fierce. The Golden Crow godly fire was one of the top 3 godly fires in the universe. It was so powerful that it could melt the sky. "Incinerate the heavens. Fire dragon," the Golden Crow Imperial Prince said. In an instant, his 2 tridents turned into a fire dragon. "Split open the sky." Jian Wushuang took a deep breath and his divine power burst out. He instantly activated the sky-opening sword and slashed down at Emperor Jin Wu's head. Boom! As the 2 of them clashed, countless Golden Crow divine flames exploded and landed in the void, burning him. You're actually able to force me back." The Golden Crow Prince's eyes flickered and he took half a step back. He looked down at his numb palm and praised, "Blood sword, with this one strike, you will have a place in the 8 cities. Unfortunately, you should never have thought of taking the investiture of the gods for yourself." Although he was complimenting, the killing intent between his brows was getting colder. This kid must die today. Otherwise, if he were to let this brat escape, it would be difficult to kill him in the future. Jian Wushuang did not have time to reply. Instead, he turned his eyes and looked coldly at Moonslayer. The Moonslayer held the demon sword's hilt diagonally and moved as fast as a phantom. With one step, a second Moonslayer suddenly appeared in the void not far in front of him. Then a third, a fourth, a fifth. This was the afterimage that was created by Moonslayer's speed. It was only when Moonslayer appeared in front of Jian Wushuang and slashed at him with the demonic blade that the first afterimage of Moonslayer disappeared. What a fast speed! Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes. This person's speed was much faster than heavenly snake playboys. Voila! When Moonslayer slashed down, Jian Wushuang was about to raise his sword to block it. However, he saw that Moonslayer's right hand turned over and instantly changed from a slash to a diagonal slash. The demonic blade directly cut through Jian Wushuang's body. Buzz! Immediately, a deep cut appeared on Jian Wushuang's divine body. Jian Wushuang lowered his head and looked at the knife marks on his divine body. Countless divine power spread out and his divine body recovered instantly. His face was filled with surging battle intent. Although Moonslayer had not said anything from the beginning to the end, in terms of strength, he was probably no weaker than the Golden Crow Emperor. Moreover, this person's understanding of Saber Dao had also reached the 4th origin of Cosmic Saber Dao. As expected, those who have reached the invincible ruler realm are not simple characters. Jian Wushuang muttered to himself. The fighting intent in his eyes suddenly increased by 3 inches, and he shouted in a low voice, "Again!" In an instant, Jian Wushuang performed Gale Sword Principle and charged at Moonslayer. In terms of speed, Jian Wushuang was no match for him even with the help of the sword principle of Gale. However, he had other means. Dragon-destroying secret skill, divine power ignition. Boom! The vast divine power that had calmed down in Jian Wushuang's body started to burn madly again. Under the burning of divine power, his strength instantly increased. Blood sword, you've made me excited. Moonslayer's calm expression changed. He laughed and slashed at Jian Wushuang with his saber. Boom! 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 The two of them were extremely fast, and they exchanged hundreds of moves in the void in an instant. The Wuxia divine sword and the demon blade in Moonslayer's hand kept clashing. Every time they collided, a series of sparks would be created, and a shocking explosion would be heard. Their understanding of sword principle and blade principle were on the same level, but Jian Wushuang's use of universe law and the total amount of divine power was much stronger than that of Killer. Soon, the Moonslayer was at a disadvantage. When the Golden Crow Prince, Rabbit Buddha, and the others saw this scene, their faces turned grave. Golden Crow, Rabbit Buddha, the Dark Demon Descendant said indifferently, "This blood sword's comprehension of the sword doctrine has already reached the realm of great success. If you continue to hold back and allow him to continue fighting, I dare say that we will be defeated one by one." Hearing this, Golden Crow Emperor and Rabbit Buddha both frowned. However, they knew that the Dark Demon Descendant was telling the truth. The most important thing now was to get the investiture of the gods. There was no need to fight with Jian Wushuang. Let's work together to kill this person first to prevent any accidents. Emperor Jin Wu's words were equivalent to a hammer announcing Jian Wushuang's death sentence. Innate divine ability. Golden Crow devours the sun. As soon as he finished speaking, the illusionary image of a huge golden crow appeared behind him. The golden crow was thousands of feet tall and was bathed in the sun. Its wings were made of fire and it let out a clear cry that shook the world. Seeing this, the Dark Demon Descendant also said, "Innate divine ability, abyssal blood river." Walala! A huge blood river appeared around the Dark Demon Descendant. This blood river seemed to be real as it kept flowing and gave off a loud rumbling sound. The Buddha is merciful. The Rabbit Buddha put its palms together and spoke word by word. Boom! 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 Heaven and earth began to shake, and countless clouds were torn apart. First, an inch of golden light shot out through the dark clouds. Then, more and more golden lights appeared. In the next moment, the entire sky was filled with multicolored light as countless rays of Buddhist light shone on the earth. A giant golden Buddha appeared and sat in the void. This golden Buddha was shining with golden light, looking solemn and full of a holy and inviolable feeling. The strange thing was that this golden Buddha head was a rabbit head with red eyes. It had an additional gloominess to it in the holy aura. Go! The three of them waved their hands and in a split second, 3 destructive attacks were launched at Jian Wushuang at the same time. The sun-swallowing golden crow flapped its wings and countless flames fell from its wings like molten lava. It opened its mouth and bit at Jian Wushuang. Then, the blood river gushed toward Jian Wushuang like a rising tide. Finally, the giant Buddha stretched out its 5 fingers and pressed down on Jian Wushuang. Each of these 5 fingers was as tall as a mountain. When they pressed down, they immediately covered the sky and the sun, causing the void to explode with all kinds of sound barriers. Jian Wushuang and Moonslayer watched the joint attack of the 3 unrivaled rulers and could not help but stop their movements. Moonslayer, who had been suppressed by Jian Wushuang and could only parry, shook his head and said, "Blood sword, your comprehension of sword principle is no less than my comprehension of saber principle. It's a pity that the situation doesn't allow me to continue fighting with you." With that, Moonslayer took a step back and said, word by word, "Secret skill, God-stepping slash." Boom! This slash seemed to split the heavens and earth, dividing them into 2 worlds, yin and yang. The saber chi swept across the entire area. Kill! The 4 rulers did not hold back at all, and they all used secret arts and divine abilities. Looking at the 4 destructive attacks that carried the power of heaven and earth, Jian Wushuang's expression turned grave and he took a deep breath. Divine body appear. a power that came from the deepest part of his soul and belonged to the perfect level of life emerged. In an instant, Jian Wushuang's body emitted a burst of crackling sounds like beans being fried. Then, Jian Wushuang's divine body started to expand inch by inch. 1 miles, 10 miles, 100 miles, 1,000 miles, 10,000 miles, 30,000 miles, 60,000 miles. In the blink of an eye, Jian Wushuang had turned into an unparalleled giant who held the sun, moon, and stars in his hands and stepped on the earth. His body was surrounded by immortal light, making it impossible to see his face clearly. He looked like a chaotic, immortal king, and an indescribable, terrifying power spread out from his body. In front of this chaos immortal king, the Golden Crow Prince and the others were as small as ants. Even the giant Golden Buddha sitting in the void was like a young boy, not even reaching his knees. Suppress, Jian Wushuang said with a muffled voice. The next moment Jian Wushuang moved. He first reached out his palm and slammed his 5 fingers at the Golden Buddha. Then he spread out his other hand and grabbed the Golden Crow's hand like a little chick. He raised his feet and stepped on the blood river of the dark demon descendant and the shocking blade light of the moon killing. Jian Wushuang's divine body suppressed 4 unrivaled rulers at the same time. Bang! No words could describe the collision. Under this collision, it was as if the world had fallen into an apocalypse. Mountains and rivers were overturned, heaven and earth were reversed, and a shocking wave of air was set off. A huge shock wave spread out, filling up all the nearby mountains. Immediately, an explosion sounded, as if thousands of thunderbolts had exploded at the same time. What? The Golden Crow Imperial Prince's pupils contracted, and for the first time, his cold and emotionless face was filled with disbelief. The Rabbit Buddha and Moonslayer were not any better. Their faces were filled with shock. As for the weakest dark demon descendant, he was directly hit by the shock wave and almost fell from the sky. Is this the power of aberrance? The 4 of them looked at each other, their eyes filled with extreme shock. Not only the 4 of them, but even Commander Mountain Shaker and the others in the distance could sense the earth-shaking explosive power. Who could be so terrifying? Commander Mountain Shaker cried out in shock. Commander Han Feng took a deep breath and replied with bright eyes. No matter how terrifying the power is, it's obvious that the battle between Bloodsword and the Golden Crow Prince must be extremely intense. The surging air waves that filled the sky gradually dissipated. Jian Wushuang, who had been hit by the 4 shocking divine abilities and secret skills, had thousands of cracks on his divine body. The 4 great divine abilities and secret skills had already disappeared. Hoo. As the strong wind blew, Jian Wushuang raised his head and looked at the 4 people coldly. Now it's my turn. He rubbed his hands together, and the Wuxia divine sword floated in front of his chest, turning into a silver sword rainbow that was nearly 10,000 feet long. Sundering stars. Immediately after, the silver sword rainbow that was close to 10,000 feet long locked onto the dark demon descendant and quickly slashed down. Seeing this, the dark demon descendant almost spat out blood in anger. He roared, "Blood sword, why don't you kill anyone else, but just keep harping on me?" Jian Wushuang's expression was cold, and he did not answer. He could sense that the amount of divine power required to support his divine body was simply too terrifying. Even if he was a perfect-level special life form with more than 13,000 times his divine power, he would be close to running out. He would probably only be able to last for 10 more breaths. Thus, he had to take advantage of his peak condition and kill one of the 4 invincible rulers in 10 breaths. The dark demon descendant was obviously the best choice. In the first breath, a silver sword rainbow that was 10,000 feet long condensed. In the second breath, the silver sword beam slashed down at the dark demon descendant. Secret skill, Blood Lotus Platform. The dark demon descendant looked at the silver sword rainbow and let out a furious roar. His hands quickly formed a seal, and in the void in front of him, blood-colored lotus flowers appeared. These blood-colored lotus flowers intersected with each other, and each of them was absorbing the power of heaven and earth, rapidly growing. In just 3 breaths' time, the lotuses intertwined together and formed a blood-red lotus platform that spun toward the silver sword rainbow. Golden Crow, Rabbit Buddha, and Moonslayer, if I die, can you stop him? The dark demon descendant turned around and shouted. Hearing this, the expressions of Emperor Jinwu, Rabbit Buddha, and Moonslayer changed. They knew Jian Wushuang's intention. He took a deep breath and said in a low voice, "That's right, this blood sword has already matured. We must gather the strength of the 4 of us to kill him. Everyone, don't hold back and block this sword." The Golden Crow Prince flipped his right hand, and a net woven from the Golden Crow's wings shot out to protect the dark demon descendant. The Golden Crow wings were clearly very precious, and even the Golden Crow Prince felt a pang of pain in his heart. The Rabbit Buddha hesitated for a moment before spitting out a 5-colored relic from its mouth. The 5-colored relic collided with Jian Wushuang's silver sword rainbow. "It's really too difficult for this poor monk." He shook his head and sighed. Without any hesitation, Killer unsheathed his sword again and slashed out a shocking blade light. The 10,000-foot-long silver sword rainbow was like the reverse of the heavenly river, slashing down at the dark demon descendant. The sword rainbow was so vast that it swallowed the blood-red lotus throne and the 5-colored relic like a flood. Even the clouds in the sky were split 5,000 feet apart by Jian Wushuang's sword, forming a long and narrow white line. Bang! Under the silver sword rainbow, the blood-colored lotus platform was the first to collapse. The lotus leaves began to break and the lotus platform began to crack. With an explosion, the blood-colored lotus platform shattered. What a terrifying sword rainbow! The dark demon descendant felt as if he had been struck by a hammer. His chest caved in, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. At this point, 6 breaths had passed since Jian Wushuang had used the star-slashing sword rainbow. The 5-colored relic that the Rabbit Buddha had spat out was spinning continuously, blocking the silver sword rainbow that was crashing down like a flood. However, in just half a breath's time, the 5-colored Saraira could no longer hold on and let out a series of unpleasant cracking sounds. Finally, with a muffled bang, it broke into pieces. The Rabbit Buddha's body trembled violently, and he retreated several steps. There was a hint of pain in his eyes. He had spent countless hours and energy to produce this 5-colored relic. In just a few more chaos cycles, it would very likely transform into an ultimate nomological treasure. However, all his efforts had failed at the last step. Only the demonic blade in Killer's hand turned into a shocking blade light that cut into the silver sword rainbow. The blade light went in for dozens of meters, but it was like cutting leather. The deeper he went, the harder it was to enter. In the end, the silver sword rainbow's terrifying sword intent completely shattered the blade light. On the other hand, Killer was instantly sent flying backward and crashed into a mountain far away. As for the silver sword rainbow, after breaking through all the obstacles, it finally struck the head of the dark demon descendant. The net of wings that was given to him by the Golden Crow Prince quickly flew out and caught the silver sword rainbow. However, the star-slashing sword rainbow, which was supported by Jian Wushuang's divine power, the will of the universe, the burning of divine power, the 4th level of the origin of sword principle, and other powers, was too terrifying. After most of the sword chi was destroyed by the winged net, the winged net woven by Emperor Jinwu's wings failed and broke with a loud bang after a mournful cry. In the end, the silver sword rainbow was unstoppable. Under the furious roar of the dark demon descendant, it cut him in half like a knife cutting through tofu. This time, the dark demon descendant was not so lucky. Before he could use the Blood River Division's secret skill, his divine body was completely ground into pieces by the sharp sword intent, turning into fine powder. At this point, 10 breaths had passed. The dark demon descendant, one of the 4 unrivaled rulers, had fallen. The Golden Crow Prince, the Rabbit Buddha, and the Moonslayer's expressions changed. Jian Wushuang had broken the joint attack of the 4 of them with one stroke. Hiss! Emperor Jinwu and the other 2 gasped. They were certain that Jian Wushuang had the battle strength of a big shot. The 4 of them were the strongest among the unparalleled rulers. In terms of fighting power, They were much stronger than the third prince and the others that Jian Wushuang had met in the Taro ruins. Emperor Jin Wu was even known as the strongest person under the 9 overlords. With the 4 of them working together, even a big shot would have to retreat. Where did this abnormal person come from? The 3 of them looked at each other, their hearts filled with shock. High up in the sky, Jian Wushuang's aura began to fall rapidly. His divine body gradually shrank and finally returned to its normal shape. Jian Wushuang laughed bitterly as he felt the excruciating pain in his bones. The price of using divine body was too high. However, the good thing was that it was still much better than the last time he used his divine body. He did not lose his combat power immediately. Jian Wushuang grabbed with his right hand and took out dozens of supreme-grade divine herbs from his interspatial ring. He did not care how expensive the divine herbs were. With a single thought, he destroyed them all. It was converted into the purest divine power to replenish his energy. Seeing this, the Golden Crow Prince took a deep breath and replied, "Everyone, this kid is taking turns to attack. I believe the price he has to pay is also huge. Let's not hold back anymore and kill him together." The Rabbit Buddha and the Moonslayer nodded slightly. In an instant, 3 earth-shattering killing intents exploded, turning into a turbulent wind that shattered the clouds. Jian Wushuang's expression was still cold, but his eyes were surging with battle intent. The curtains of this world-shocking battle had once again drawn. Boom! With a loud explosion, Emperor Jin Wu, the Moonslayer, and the Rabbit Buddha stepped on the void and charged at Jian Wushuang again. The trident in Emperor Jin Wu's hand disappeared and his arms turned into a pair of flaming wings. His eyes were replaced by divine fire. With a flap of his wings, he appeared in the air above Jian Wushuang. Roar! The Golden Crow Prince opened his mouth and let out a cry that shook the 9 heavens and 10 hells. Then he spat out a fireball. At first, the fireball was only the size of a fist, but after it came out of his mouth, it grew bigger and bigger. When it came down on Jian Wushuang's head, the fireball had turned into a golden sun. The sun was vast and boundless. Not to mention the flames burning inside. Just the heat it emitted was enough to dry up the earth of the 16th city. The Rabbit Buddha, on the other hand, closed its eyes. Its blood-red sword began to shatter into pieces. In the next moment, he turned into a 1,000-handed evil Buddha. Countless arms reached out from various parts of his body, each hand holding a different Dharma treasure. There was an alms bowl, a scripture book, a staff, a sarira, and so on. A wicked smile appeared on his face. Then, his lips moved up and down as he began to chant a strange Buddhist sutra. Under the influence of the Buddhist scripture, the magic weapons in his thousands of arms all rose into the air and condensed into a swastika Buddha seal, which pressed toward Jian Wushuang. On the other hand, Killer closed his eyes, and a strong wind started to blow with him as the center. Secret skill, God Slayer. He opened his mouth and slowly spat out these 5 words. The next moment, he took a step forward and slashed out with his saber. This blade was like a half-moon, full of imperceptible momentum. It was the embodiment of all his comprehension of the path of the blade. After this slash was unleashed, it directly tore apart the vast sky and destroyed the heavens and earth. A fireball as bright as the sun. A swastika Buddhist seal that blotted out the sun. A terrifying blade aura that tore the sky apart. 3 waves of power, like 3 heavenly rivers, smashed down with unparalleled power. Facing the 3 unrivaled unique skills, Jian Wushuang's serious expression gradually returned to calmness. He let go of the Wuxia divine sword and spread his arms as if he was embracing heaven and earth. He raised his head and took deep breaths. The next moment, he lowered his head and stared at the 3 of them. Tarot Sword Manual. First move, Eternal Night. Wang. After he finished speaking, time and space seemed to have stopped. There was no earth-shaking explosion, nor was there any explosion that could make the world lose its color. It was as if a tiny stone had been thrown into a calm lake, raising circles of ripples. The Wuxia divine sword, which was floating in front of him, started to disappear from the tip of the sword to the hilt. What the hell is Blood Sword doing? What does he want to do? The Golden Crow Prince and the Rabbit Buddha furrowed their brows tightly. They could feel a strange force starting to erode them. This strange power was like a pair of invisible hands hidden in the dark. It shakily reached out from behind them and grabbed their necks. Coldness, suffocation, darkness, dullness, stiffness. All kinds of negative emotions gushed out. The colors of the world started to fade rapidly, and the light in the sky gradually disappeared. Everything was so silent and natural. Without realizing it, the world in their eyes had lost its color. The world was only left with a thick, hazy gray. The gray color continued to deepen, as if it was going to drag them into an eternal dark abyss. Feeling this power, the Golden Crow Prince and the Rabbit Buddha felt a strong sense of uneasiness in their hearts. There was clearly no danger, but their innate intuition made them hate everything in front of them and want to escape. Out of the three of them, only Slayer seemed to have realized something. He was stunned and looked at the scene in a daze. His lips trembled in fear. This energy is the recorded Tarot Sword Manual. In an instant, his face turned deathly white, and his entire body swayed, almost falling from the sky. How could this be? Wasn't the Tarot Sword Manual long lost? Why did it appear in his hands? He mumbled to himself in confusion, his body trembling violently. The Golden Crow Prince noticed this and asked with a frown, "What's wrong, Moonslayer?" Upon hearing this question, Moonslayer suddenly woke up and shouted at the top of his lungs, "Quickly run!" Both the Golden Crow Prince and the Rabbit Buddha were stunned. They did not know what the Moonslayer was up to. However, their innate caution made them subconsciously escape first. Unfortunately, it was all over. When the eternal night began, the space that the three of them were in no longer belonged to the ancient path of stars. Instead, it belonged to the domain of eternal darkness that the eternal night had created. Jian Wushuang looked at the scene with an emotionless expression. He said softly, "Strip me of my power." Wisps of black mist spread out from Jian Wushuang's feet and slowly crawled toward the three of them. Finally, they intertwined and formed a huge black ball that wrapped the three of them. To outsiders, the black ball looked like it would break with a single poke. But to the three princes, it was a boundless pitch-black kingdom. This was not Ninth Kulpa King's one-thought divine kingdom, but Jian Wushuang's one sword to form a kingdom. In the dark space, the expressions of the Golden Crow Prince, the Rabbit Buddha, and the Moonslayer changed. They could feel that there was an invisible force in the eternal darkness that was taking away their divine power and vitality. The joint attack that they had launched earlier was also wrapped up in this dark kingdom. In this dark kingdom, the attack that could destroy a planet and shatter a galaxy seemed to have been sucked out of it. The originally terrifying power began to weaken at a speed visible to the naked eye. In just a few breaths, the three forces completely disappeared. Pung 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 pung. The Moonslayer Demon Saber and the Rabbit Buddha's thousands of supreme treasures all disappeared. They turned into ordinary weapons and fell into the endless darkness. How is that possible? The Golden Crow Prince and the Rabbit Buddha's pupils shrank, and for the first time, they were overwhelmed with shock. What kind of power is this? That's my origin divine flame, and not even the profound glacial nether water can put it out. How did this happen? The Golden Crow Prince asked in disbelief. The Rabbit Buddha was also in shock. He had spent countless years collecting these nomological supreme treasures, and every one of them was his painstaking effort. At this moment, hundreds of law treasures were damaged. He could not help but roar, "Blood Sword, I will kill you." Out of the three of them, only Slayer had a bitter smile on his face. He shook his head helplessly, not looking surprised at all. From the moment he recognized this move, he knew that the outcome was already decided. "Break! Die!" The Golden Crow Prince bellowed, unleashing several divine flames. However, it was useless. The moment the divine flame was thrown out, it was absorbed by the surrounding void. The Golden Crow Prince discovered an even more terrifying fact. He found that the divine power that he had relied on to suppress the heavens and remain undefeated in the Eternal Night Kingdom was gradually dissipating. The ultimate rulers of the fifth level, a ruler of the fourth level, the master of the natural order. In just a few short moments, the Golden Crow Imperial Prince had fallen from being an unparalleled ruler who could command the universe to the mortal world. His old and handsome face began to droopy and wrinkle. The Eternal Night technique could strip everything. Not only did it take away his divine power, but it also took away his lifespan. In an instant, the Golden Crow Imperial Prince seemed to have experienced the birth, aging, sickness, and death of mortals. He turned from a handsome and powerful ultimate ruler into an old mortal. In the end, the Golden Crow Prince could not even change his form. He turned into a three-legged golden crow that was exhausted. At the same time, the Moonslayer and the Rabbit Buddha had turned into two dried corpses under the Force. Seeing this, the Golden Crow Prince was in despair. At the last moment of his life, he shakily reached out and crushed a token hanging on his waist. He raised his head with difficulty and said, "Father, save me!" Boom! An ancient and majestic cry of a golden crow that seemed to have transcended the primeval era of the universe suddenly sounded. The next moment, Jian Wushuang felt an indescribable heat and terror. With Emperor Jin Wu as the center, it exploded. This power was far beyond Jian Wushuang's knowledge. It was a supreme power that he could not resist even if he used all his strength. Under the mighty force, Jian Wushuang's Eternal Night Kingdom was torn apart. Under the indescribable, terrifying power, Jian Wushuang retreated crazily and his arms exploded. The Eternal Night Kingdom formed by the Eternal Night swordsmanship was shattered. What kind of power is this? Jian Wushuang looked over in shock. The Golden Crow Prince's eyes were tightly shut and his energy was extremely weak. He was on the verge of death and seemed like he would die at any moment. However, behind him countless flames suddenly surged. The flame gathered behind him and slowly turned into a human figure. He then reached out his hands and lifted the Golden Crow Prince up. The flaming figure's face could not be seen clearly, but it had a pressure that could make the world lose its color and make all races submit to it. The pressure was extremely terrifying. Under the pressure, Jian Wushuang's divine body could not help but be torn apart. After the pressure passed Jian Wushuang, it swept out in all directions. Wherever the pressure passed, the void would explode. What kind of power? The aura of a ruler. Under this pressure, the entire last 8 cities were shocked. Countless people were shocked and rushed over, looking at this place. Some of these gazes even came from the 9 magnates. However, after seeing the flaming figure, the 9 big shots, who had always been all-powerful in the back 8 cities, all put away their unscrupulous sizing up and became extremely respectful and obedient. Who dares to hurt my son? The flaming figure raised his head slowly and looked at Jian Wushuang. Then, he spoke in a deep voice that was so majestic that no one could resist. It was as if he was a heavenly god who controlled the life and death of the universe, holding the power to kill. In the eyes of the flaming figure, there were 2 balls of divine fire. The 2 balls of divine fire were like 2 suns embedded in them. No one could look at them directly. Under the gaze of the flaming figure, the void seemed to be unable to hold on and was about to collapse. Jian Wushuang's body was trembling, as if his divine body was about to explode. Great Emperor Golden Crow. Jian Wushuang's eyes were filled with anger and his pupils shrank. Jian Wushuang did not have to guess to know that the flaming figure was the famous Great Emperor Jin Wu. The Great Emperor Jin Wu had made his name 500 chaos cycles ago. He was one of the most senior top-tier supremes in the universe. His strength ranked in the top 10 among the universe supremes. He dominated the heavens and his name shook all races. The name Great Emperor Jin Wu was definitely one of the most terrifying names in the universe. Even the Blood Wave Supreme and the Supreme Giant Axe could only be considered juniors in front of the Golden Crow. They had to show respect to the Golden Crow. Was it you who hurt my son? Great Emperor Jin Wu's gaze was fixed on Jian Wushuang's face. Although he was asking a question, his domineering tone was unquestionable. Jian Wushuang felt Emperor Jin Wu's gaze was like a terrifying divine fire that was about to burn through him. Jian Wushuang gritted his teeth and did not reply. He was not a stupid and reckless person. Even though he was extremely aggrieved, he knew that at this moment, rather than arguing, it was better to remain silent and use silence to express his attitude. In this world, the strong were respected. No one would try to reason with an ant that could be crushed with a finger. Jian Wushuang, on the other hand, was like an ant that could be crushed with one finger. The golden crow narrowed his eyes and looked up at the sky. "Little guy, this lord will not argue with you this time for the sake of that lord. However, you won't be so lucky next time." After saying that, the flaming figure of great Emperor Jin Wu and the golden crow prince, whose eyes were closed, turned into fine sand from their feet. In the end, a breeze blew by and the two disappeared into the 8 cities behind the ancient path of stars. It was not until there was only the strong wind in the sky that Jian Wushuang finally relaxed and let out a long breath. Is this how terrifying a top-tier supreme being in the universe is? Jian Wushuang laughed bitterly. He had originally thought that although the Supremes were terrifying, they would not be so terrifying. For example, he had previously met the Black Eagle Supreme from the Cosmos Temple, the White Floating Supreme from the Great Void God Temple, and so on. Although he was far from being a match for them, they would not be so terrifying that his soul would tremble with just a look. This was the first time he had faced a top-tier supreme being in the universe, and the oppression and suffocation coming from the depths of his soul made him feel like he was looking up at the endless sky when he was young. That feeling made him feel so small. Moreover, the flaming figure was not the real great Emperor Jin Wu. It was just a divine power mark left by the great Emperor Jin Wu on the Golden Crow Emperor. How terrifying would the real great Emperor Jin Wu be? Jian Wushuang did not dare to think any further. At this moment, in the solar star system that was extremely far away from the depths of the universe. This was the habitat of the Golden Crow tribe. The 9 huge fireballs were arranged in a formation of 9 stars, forming a circle of light, like the stars surrounding the moon. In the middle of these 9 fireballs, there was a sun that was 100 times larger than these 9 fireballs, suppressing the starry sky. This sun was so huge that it was impossible to describe it with words. Ordinary stars were as small as dust in front of it. The flames it emitted lit up the surrounding dozens of star areas. Gulp. On the sun in the center, there were countless streams of boiling lava flowing and rolling. Huge bubbles emerged, giving off terrifying burning sounds. Every time a bubble burst, countless divine flames would splash out. Any random wisp of this divine flame could kill an ultimate sovereign. "Father, what's wrong with Big Brother?" At this moment, a 3-legged golden crow that was 10,000 miles long flew out from one of the 9 small suns. It flapped its wings and came to the huge sun in the center. "It's none of your business. Don't ask. Don't ask." A deep, majestic, and ancient voice came from the depths of the central sun. When the 3-legged golden crow heard this, his body trembled and he did not dare to ask any more questions. He quickly took his leave. In the depths of the sun, in the endless lava, a pair of huge scarlet eyes suddenly opened. The ancient path of stars this time around is quite interesting. The aura I sensed earlier, that little fellow who was exiled by the dragon clan, seems to have gone too? Interesting. With a faint smile, the pair of huge scarlet eyes slowly closed. The great Emperor Jin Wu fell into a long slumber once more. The unconscious golden crow imperial prince slowly rose from the depths of the lava. His flabby and wrinkly skin began to recover gradually under the nourishment of the lava. His dissipated divine power was also restored at an astonishing speed. The next moment, the golden crow prince's eyes suddenly opened. He took a heavy step and rushed out of the lava. "Blood sword! How dare you kill me? I will definitely kill you!" A shrill roar suddenly exploded in the solar star area, the ancient path of stars. 16th City. Jian Wushuang sat cross-legged in the void, quietly recovering his divine power and divine body. Some of the ultimate rulers who had rushed over after hearing the news looked at Jian Wushuang with complicated expressions from a distance. Although they had not witnessed the battle between Jian Wushuang and the 4 unparalleled rulers, they had been watching it in secret. They had thought that, with the 4 unrivaled rulers attacking, Even a top figure would not be able to escape death. They had not expected that Jian Wushuang would be able to counterattack and reverse the outcome. He had turned the tide with his own strength and killed 4 invincible rulers. What kind of terrifying combat power was this? Commander Han Shan, Commander Han Feng, and the others also looked at Jian Wushuang from afar. There was no longer fear and horror in their eyes, but deep respect. Others only knew that Jian Wushuang's battle strength was unparalleled and that he could fight against 4 people alone. They did not know that Jian Wushuang was only a 5th-stage ruler. With the power of a 5th-stage ruler, he had killed 4 invincible rulers. This kind of thing was simply unheard of since ancient times. Not only was it unprecedented, it would probably never be heard of again. "There's something terrifying about Blood Sword," muttered Commander Mountain Shaker. There were even more people staring at Jian Wushuang with burning eyes. After this battle, Blood Sword will become a god, and his name will shake the universe. From now on, the power structure of the last 8 cities of the ancient Path of Stars will change because of Blood Sword. He will become the 10th magnate of the last 8 cities. Unparalleled. Blood Sword God Seal. Blood Sword. Ascend to the throne of the giants on the ancient Path of Stars. Countless people were secretly amazed. Just as the crowd was boiling with excitement, suddenly, an extremely discordant low laugh sounded from the outermost part of the crowd. "Oh, it's so lively." A hunched man with spikes on his back and a pale face walked in with a sandalwood box in his arms. This person was Qiu Long. Where did this person come from? This person is barging in and out of his way. How rude. Humph. Where did this brat come from? Get lost. You're courting death. An ultimate ruler, who was almost invincible, frowned and looked displeased. He reached out to grab Qiu Long, trying to pull him behind him. Before he could touch Qiu Long, "Get lost. Die." Qiu Long casually slapped out and sent this near-invincible ultimate ruler flying 10,000 feet away. He fell from the sky like a cannonball and smashed into the great emperors, raising a cloud of dust. When everyone saw this scene, their throats rolled and they swallowed their saliva. They did not dare to make a sound. Just like that, Qiu Long walked out from the crowd and raised his head to look at Jian Wushuang, who was sitting cross-legged in the void. He first took out a mystic light mirror from his waist and looked at it as if he was verifying his identity. Then, he looked up at Jian Wushuang and chuckled, "Blood Sword, I've finally found you." Hearing this, Jian Wushuang slowly opened his eyes and frowned. "Is there something you need?" Hearing this, Qiu Long let out a strange smile and said, "It's nothing. I just want to borrow something from you." "You want to borrow something from me?" Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows and said, "What are you borrowing?" Qiu Long was not in a hurry to reply. Instead, he stepped on the void with his right foot and soared into the sky. He stretched out his hand and slapped at Jian Wushuang. He laughed in a low voice, "Let me borrow your head." Boom! Before he could land his palm on Jian Wushuang, the spikes on his back had already turned into countless black chains and shot toward Jian Wushuang. Boom! 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 The speed of these spikes was extremely fast, like countless cannonballs, creating a series of intense sonic booms in the air. "What?" Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows. Although he did not know who this person was or why he suddenly attacked him, his subconscious battle experience made him instantly take a step back. In a flash, he had already appeared 1,000 feet behind him. "You're quite fast." Qiu Long chuckled and instantly turned into a black shadow, dashing toward Jian Wushuang again. The dense black chains floated behind his back and bombarded Jian Wushuang continuously. Jian Wushuang's eyes turned cold and the Wuxia divine sword appeared in his hand. He moved quickly and slashed at Qiu Long. Clang, 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 clang. Bang, 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 bang. Jian Wushuang instantly swung thousands of swords at the black chain, causing a long trail of sparks. Wang! Jian Wushuang retreated rapidly, his legs leaving 2 long white marks in the air. What a terrifying power! Jian Wushuang's pupils could not help but shrink. He looked down and his perlicue became numb. That was nothing. Most importantly, Jian Wushuang and the four ultimate rulers had used their divine bodies by force, and the Eternal Night Kingdom had been destroyed. Their divine bodies were already riddled with holes. After the battle, the pain of their divine bodies being torn apart was extreme. Not bad. Again. Qiu Long Zhangquang laughed sinisterly as he charged at Jian Wushuang again with a crazy battle intent in his eyes. Go die 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 die. Pung pung pung. Countless black chains charged at Jian Wushuang at an even faster speed. Jian Wushuang's face darkened and he quickly slashed out with the Wuxia divine sword. Every time he hit the chain, Jian Wushuang felt his body shake violently. Every time the chain smashed down, it was extremely heavy. We can't continue like this. Jian Wushuang took a deep breath and shouted with a serious expression, "Split open the sky!" In an instant, the sky-opening sword radiance turned into a roaring river and slashed down at Qiu Long. Who can such soft power kill? Qiu Long sneered and grabbed the sky-opening sword light. The sharp sword will burst out and kept cutting at Qiu Long's palm, but it could not even break his defense. The next moment, Qiu Long opened his mouth and bit the sky-opening sword light. Kacha kacha kacha. The sky-opening sword ray was chewed up and swallowed. How is that possible? Jian Wushuang's expression changed drastically and he could not believe it. Blood sword, it's my turn next. Qiu Long stuck out his spiky tongue and licked his lips cruelly. He then let out a strange smile and stretched out his arms as if he was hugging the heavens and the earth. Dragon, God, cannon, boom! At his chest, countless divine power condensed and formed a blue ball of light that had been compressed to the extreme. This blue ball of light was extremely terrifying. Its chaotic and brutal divine power spread out, and even the void cracked. The next moment, Qiu Long thrust out his chest and the blue light ball immediately flew toward Jian Wushuang like a missile. The moment this blue ball of light appeared, it streaked through the air and turned countless space into dust. Jian Wushuang's pupils shrank and his expression became extremely serious. He could not care about the pain coming from his divine body and shouted, "Sundering stars!" Bang! The silver sword rainbow reappeared in the world. Like the water of the sky and the divine thunder of dawn, it slashed toward Qiu Long with infinite power. Look! Blood Sword killed the dark demon descendant with this sword. Who in the world can block such a sword? The elegance of this sword is truly like a sword god descending from the heavens. Countless people exclaimed. There was also a swordsman whose eyes were burning and whose face was full of fascination. He sighed and said, "This is how sword cultivators like us should be." However, only Jian Wushuang himself knew that his divine power was completely exhausted and his divine body was riddled with holes. If the star-slashing sword had even half of its usual power, it would be a blessing. I'm afraid there will be trouble today. Jian Wushuang shook his head with a bitter smile. Bang! Sundering stars and the dense blue ball of light collided together. A deafening explosion was heard. Then, the silver sword rainbow began to collapse and finally disappeared. As for the blue ball of light, after its brightness dimmed a little, it went straight for Jian Wushuang again. There was a muffled sound. Before Jian Wushuang could react, the blue light ball had pierced through his divine body and left a huge hole. Jian Wushuang's face instantly turned extremely pale. He actually swayed and almost fell from the sky. His divine body had suffered an unprecedented injury. The entire place instantly fell into a dead silence. Everyone looked at this scene in a daze and forgot to speak for a moment. 1 second ago, Jian Wushuang had fought against 4 of them and killed 4 invincible rulers. In the next second, he had been defeated by this strange man who had come out of nowhere. Immediately, they reacted and glared at Qiu Long. Despicable! Take advantage of Blood Sword's weakest moment and attack. Taking advantage of the situation, what a good method. Shameless! A series of indignant and mocking voices could be heard. Qiu Long shrugged his shoulders nonchalantly and spread his hands. He glanced at Jian Wushuang and said in disdain, "Weak, weak, weak. Blood Sword, you're too weak." After saying that, Qiu Long laughed out loud. Then he shook his head and said, I really don't know what Bingyi is thinking. He's just a piece of trash. How can he be worthy of my help? Jian Wushuang remained expressionless, but his eyes grew colder. He could feel that the divine power in his body was not even enough to heal the wounds on his divine body. You're not talking? TSK, TSK, TSK. How boring. Qiulong spread out his hands and with a flash of his body, he appeared in front of Jian Wushuang. So fast. Jian Wushuang's pupils shrank. He raised his arm with difficulty and tried to block the Wuxia divine sword. However, Qiulong had already thrown out his leg and kicked Jian Wushuang's waist like a 9-section giant whip. Trash should have the attitude of trash. Bang! This kick directly threw Jian Wushuang off the 9-layered cloud ridge, and he smashed into a mountain rock, creating a human-shaped pit. What? He's like an ant that can be easily crushed. Qiulong pouted his mouth and then slowly descended, flying toward Jian Wushuang. Deep in the mountain, Jian Wushuang was lying on the ground, gasping for air like a drowning man. It hurt. Intense pain. Every bone in his body, every inch of his skin, and every vein felt like they were about to shatter, and he was in excruciating pain. Not only did Qiulong's kick destroy the divine power and divine body that he had recovered with great difficulty, but it also put him in a precarious situation. Can still fight. Jian Wushuang gritted his teeth. Although he was in great pain as if his body was about to fall apart, the coldness and determination in his eyes did not decrease at all. His hand trembled as he held the hilt of the Wuxia divine sword beside him. The tip of the sword was on the ground as he stood up shakily. Qiulong's deep and evil voice sounded again outside the rock. Oh, that's right. Blood sword. I've also prepared a gift for you. I think you'll like it very much. Whoosh! A greenish-gray arm suddenly shot from outside the mountain rock, then grabbed Jian Wushuang's neck and pulled him back fiercely. Qiulong's fingers clutched Jian Wushuang's neck tightly and lifted him up. He said with a smile, Blood sword, when I passed by the 10th city, a young man said that he was one of your men. He also said that if I dared to come to you, I would die an ugly death. Guess who that person is? Hearing this, Jian Wushuang's expression changed. In the next moment, Qiulong flipped his right hand, and a black sandalwood box appeared in his palm. The black sandalwood box slowly opened, and a head with a livid face and wide eyes appeared in front of Jian Wushuang. Hao Jin, Lord Bloodsword. Two voices rang out at the same time. Ruler Hao Jin glanced at Jian Wushuang and then turned his head to look at Qiulong. He roared angrily, You monster! What did you do to Lord Bloodsword? What did you do? Are you questioning me? Qiulong chuckled and continued. Watch how Lord Bloodsword, who you think is invincible, begs for mercy in front of me. Bang! A violent divine power suddenly surged from Qiulong's hands. Then Jian Wushuang's legs exploded. He licked the corner of his bloodthirsty mouth and said with a fake smile, Bloodsword, your game is over. I will crush your divine body from your feet to your head. Inch by inch. Ha ha ha. Despair. Beg for mercy. And roar. Jian Wushuang did not say a word and looked at him with a cold expression. His divine body started to explode and then dissipate. Even so, Jian Wushuang's expression did not change at all. Lord Bloodsword, Ruler Vast Ember immediately let out a heart-rending roar upon seeing this. His eyes filled with hatred. Bloodsword! In the distance, Commander Mountain Shaker's expression changed drastically, and he instantly dashed over. However, before he could even take 2 steps, Commander Han Feng's figure flashed, and he was already standing in front of Commander Han Shan. He extended his hand to stop him and scolded with a cold face. Han Shan, be clear about your own strength. If you rush up now, not only will you not be able to help Bloodsword, you will only end up losing your life. Commander Mountain Shaker clenched his fists tightly and gritted his teeth so hard that they made cracking sounds. He squeezed out a sentence from between his teeth. Han Feng, Bloodsword is on our side. Are we just going to leave him be? Hearing this, Han Feng's expression softened a little. He sighed and said, The weak are prey to the strong, and strength reigns supreme. This is how the world is, and it's not something we can stop. Commander Han Shan gasped for breath after hearing what Qiulong said. He turned around and could not bear to see Jian Wushuang being killed by Qiulong, Lord Bloodsword. Ruler Hao Jin looked at Jian Wushuang with a trembling gaze. His eyes were filled with self-blame and guilt. If he was stronger and could share Lord Bloodsword's burden, would Lord Bloodsword not have ended up like this? If he had not said those harsh words, would this weirdo have let Sir Bloodsword go? Ruler Vast Ember ground his teeth so hard that they made cracking sounds. This was the first time he had ever hated himself for being so weak. Jian Wushuang forced a smile on his pale face when he heard the voice. He smiled at Ruler Hao Jin and said, "It's not your fault." After that, Jian Wushuang turned to look at Qiulong and said coldly, "Tell me, who are you?" "Me?" Qiulong pinched Jian Wushuang with one hand and thought for a while. Then he said with a fake smile, "Fine, since you are going to die anyway, I will tell you. I am Qiulong from the Great Void Temple. All right, Bloodsword, die in peace." Qiulong laughed hideously, and suddenly, divine power gushed out from his 5 fingers. Infinite gravity. Bang! In an instant, the power of heaven and earth was mobilized and it squeezed toward Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang's divine body exploded inch by inch under the heavy pressure. In the end, with a loud bang, Jian Wushuang's divine body collapsed completely and turned into countless divine power that dissipated in the air. In an instant, the entire place fell into a dead silence. Dead. Countless people looked at this scene in a daze, their hearts shaking. Jian Wushuang, who had killed 4 invincible rulers in a row, had died just like that. Everyone looked at each other and felt as if they had fallen into an ice cellar. Commander Mountain Shaker clenched his fists so tightly that his nails dug into his flesh. Only Ruler Vast Ember froze, a pensive look on his face as if he had discovered something. Ha 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 ha. From today on, the entire ancient path of stars can only hear one voice, and that is the voice of me, Qiulong. In the sky above the 16th city, Qiulong's arrogant laughter came. He stood in the air and looked down at the surroundings with an evil and overbearing gaze. The crowd looked up at Qiulong and felt their hearts tremble. Time passed, and in the blink of an eye 10 years had passed. The news of Jian Wushuang killing 4 unparalleled rulers, obtaining 5 god-sealing monuments, and then being killed by Qiulong on the ancient road of stars gradually spread. The entire universe was shaken. A 5th-level ruler killing 4 unrivaled rulers was enough to bring glory to the ages and stun the world. For the first time, the name of Bloodsword shook the universe, and someone even named Jian Wushuang the number 1 genius in the universe. However, Jian Wushuang's death made more people sigh. If Bloodsword doesn't die, it'll definitely have the potential to break through to the supreme martial artist realm. In the history of our universe, there has only been one such monstrous genius. It was a pity that he has fallen just like that. Whether Bloodsword dies or not, it's enough to be recorded in the history books. That's right. There should be a place for Bloodsword on the Eternal Prodigy roll. Countless people exclaimed. As the news of Jian Wushuang's death spread further and further, the Divine Life Palace was shocked. The Divine Life Palace within the Ruler Temple. The Blood Wave Supreme sat on his big chair with a gloomy expression. He had just gone to check and found out that the lamp of life that Jian Wushuang had left behind had been extinguished. Bang! With a casual palm, he directly smashed the armrest of the big chair into pieces. With a dark expression, he said, "Investigate. Investigate for this lord. I want to know the identity of the person who killed Jian Wushuang." Qiulong. Yes. Several black-robed figures kneeled at the feet of the ruler Blood Wave. When they heard this, their hearts trembled. They knew that the ruler Blood Wave was truly angry. They hurriedly acknowledged respectfully before taking a step forward and disappearing from the Supreme Divine Hall. Even after doing all this, the frost on the Blood Wave Supreme's face did not lessen in the slightest. His eyes were filled with killing intent. Supreme Giant Axe was sitting next to him, his expression similarly ugly to the extreme. It could be said that Jian Wushuang carried the hopes and expectations of the 2 of them. He was the person they thought would be on equal footing with them in the future and even lead the Divine Life Palace. Supreme Giant Axe did not refute the ruler Bloodwave's words. Although he was not good with words, it did not mean that Jian Wushuang did not cherish him. As long as it was a fair fight, they would allow Jian Wushuang to be defeated or even die on the ancient road of stars. However, they would never allow anyone to take advantage of Jian Wushuang's difficulties and attack him secretly. Once I find out who is behind Qiulong, I will make him pay the price no matter who he is, the ruler Bloodwave said coldly, his eyes flashing with an icy light. When a supreme martial artist was enraged, billions of corpses would be buried. He wanted to let the person behind Qiulong know the price of angering a supreme martial artist. Supreme Giant Axe raised his head, and a cold killing intent flashed in his eyes. The Divine Life Palace had been dormant for dozens of chaos cycles. By the looks of it, it was time for them to properly inform the rest of the world. Any disciple of the Divine Life Palace was not to be humiliated. The Great Void Temple was dark all year round and was covered by a shadow. Under a black tower, Palace Master Bingyi, who had already become the current Emperor God of the Great Void Temple, stood quietly in front of the window with his hands behind his back. His face was emotionless, and no emotions could be seen. Outside the window, countless bolts of lightning interweaved and exploded. The blazing white lightning illuminated Palace Master Bingye's face, making it flicker. In his hand, he was holding a message that had just arrived. The contents of the message were simple. After Bloodsword killed the 4 unrivaled rulers, he was killed by Qiulong. Su'er, Jian Wushuang is dead. I've avenged you. Rest in peace. Palace Master Bingyi muttered to himself before turning around and walking toward the darkness of the Black Spire. The letter in his hand fell, and a divine fire ignited and burned it to ashes. At the same time, in the depths of the ancient path of stars, the 9th Kulpa King sat cross-legged on the peak of a mountain with his eyes closed. His white hair fluttered slightly in the wind, and his white clothes were dyed red by the supreme divine blood. In the next moment, he slowly opened his eyes and looked up at the sky. His ancient and indifferent gaze seemed to penetrate the starry sky and look into an unknown distance. In his hands, he held the most recent universe information. Dead. He lowered his head to look at the message in his hand, and a look of disdain flashed through his eyes. A surge of godly power surged out from his hand, directly crushing the universe message into dust, which scattered with the wind. He's someone who's defeated this seat before. How could he die there? He took a deep breath and shook his head in disdain. He was still waiting for Jian Wushuang to break through to the supreme level and fight with him. He was still looking forward to the meeting of all races in the universe. He would never allow Jian Wushuang to die. The world returned to silence. After a long time, a faint mutter was heard. Jian Wushuang, if you really die and Qiulong kills one of you, I will kill his entire clan to be buried with you. His voice was very soft, but it was very cold.